Bet you didn't see this video coming. Hollow Knight is a game that I didn't quite get around to trying until 2022, all because it only cost $5 on Steam, and it was the best $5 I've ever spent on a video game. This is easily in the running for my top 20 games of all time, and I could not wait for when the inevitable sequel was released. Silksong became quite a meme in gaming culture, giving GTA 6 a run for its money as the biggest copium game in the 21st century, and had many people confident that this highly anticipated follow-up was never gonna release. So when Silksong quite literally came out of nowhere in September of 2025, it was absolutely insane. Hell, all of my future planned videos were thrown on the back burner in favor of finally playing and completing this game. The question remains though, did Silksong live up to the hype that had been built up for over 7 years now? Absolutely. Silksong is a masterpiece, plain and simple. It's tough to say whether this game is better or worse than the original Hollow Knight, but they are both 10 out of 10 games easily. At the moment, I think I prefer the original due to the simple combat system and story being a bit stronger in my eyes, along with a few mechanics new to Silksong that somewhat frustrate me. However, we haven't even seen what Godhome or the DLC has in store, and there are many aspects of Silksong I find better, like the platforming and boss variety. Speaking of which, that's what this video is all about, ranking the bosses of Silksong. I've seen a lot of people say that the boss quality is significantly worse than the original, and I disagree and say that they're pretty evenly matched. A lot of the complaints people make about the runbacks and double damage are overall game issues to me. Plus, I have more of an issue with the little worms and flies dealing double damage rather than the boss triple my size. There are some stinkers in Silksong that we'll get to, but I find that the lows of this roster are far better than the lows of Hollow Knight, and the highs of this game more than make up for it. If you want an idea on what enemies I decided were bosses, it's simple. If an enemy shows up and its name appears at the corner of the screen, I'm counting it as a boss. So that means that certain mini-bosses like Mr. Skullcrusher will not be included in the ranking, despite them sometimes having a higher kill count than the actual bosses. I also won't be counting the friendly duels you can have with some companions or NPCs like Chakra, the only exceptions being the Bell Beast and Lost Garamond for obvious reasons. With that criteria, we have 45 enemies to rank, starting with the worst and working our way up to the best. For those who haven't seen my content before, this is the criteria sheet I have for those who prefer a tier list style of video, with the color of each number before the boss determining what tier I'd place it in and what score I'd give it out of 10. This will be ranking the quality of the bosses based on their design, their fight, and other factors such as the lore, arena, and how fair or fun I find the difficulty to be. Emphasis on fun and fair, since just because a boss is harder doesn't automatically make it better. I also won't be including the runback as part of judging the boss, as I feel that's more of a complaint towards the map or area they're in. The only part I will be critiquing is if they have a gauntlet of enemies beforehand, because that's meaningfully put there as an obstacle you need to complete to even retry the boss. Lastly, do remember that this list is entirely my opinion, and you're completely valid to disagree with any of my placements. Feel free to speak your opinions or debates in the comments below. With that being said, let's get this Bell Beast moving. I'm Bry Bashton Benedicts, and this is every boss ranked in Hollow Knight Silksong. One of the most insufferable experiences you can have in this game goes to the Savage Beastfly, or as I like to call him, Bob the Bitfly. Bob truly astounds me with how he takes all of the most annoying aspects you can find in Silksong bosses and makes them even more insufferable than they ever were before. You fight this guy twice, one in the dark and moody Beast Chapel, and a second time in the lava pools of Far Fields. You first see this bug in the chapel in Act 1, bashing his head repeatedly against the wall for all eternity. It's such a beautiful metaphor, because you will be the one bashing your head against the nearest wall by the time you're done with this pest. This fatty only has one way of attacking, charging forward, which does not mix well with the cramped arena and his chunky stature. A boss that mainly charges to attack isn't inherently bad, but it needs to be balanced by fair openings and a fun tempo, and holy guacamole, this is not how you do it. Sometimes Bob will have a telegraph before charging, and other times he'll just levitate forward and kill you with contact damage. This guy is the king of contact damage, and it might as well be an attack with how much he'll get you with that crap. Everything he does deals double damage as well, so because of that and the inconsistent charges, you have to play incredibly safe to avoid getting run down. Even then, safe will only get you so far when he summons his minions to harass you. Silksong has a major problem with bosses that'll summon basic goons that feel smacked on to increase the difficulty, and Bob the Bitfly is a prime example of this. He'll summon his baby beast flies to gank you, and these flatheads cooperate better than they have any right to. They always seem to perfectly align with their papa to screw you over. Not in a clever way like the conch flies or clockwork dancers, but in a screw off you pest and let me fight the real boss kind of way. Then he brings in the big enemies that'll deal double damage and take as much space as the boss itself. You're supposed to use Bob's slam attacks to kill off the minions, but the hitboxes are so sloppy that you end up getting yourself killed trying to do it. Then after fighting him for the first time, you get to the second one in the lava, and this one is even worse somehow, if only by a smidge. I actually don't mind the lava platforms, and the lack of walls allows you to use the space more freely. What makes this boss worse though is the minions. These lava spitters are horrendous and somehow worse than the baby beast flies, because they always stay far away and spit these explosive oranges that deal double damage. You can use tools to dispose of the goons on either fight, but it's so hard to do so when Big Bob is always charging at you, and never gives any downtime except to summon more minions. It's a battle that feels sloppily put together, from the terrible hitboxes, to the tacked on minions, to the constant contact damage, to the fact that he can literally get stuck under the lava and force you to restart the whole fight. Savage Beastfly is simply frustrating and cheap in a way that very few in this game can truly achieve. With the amount of hatred I have for this guy, you'd assume that I'd give him a 1 out of 10, right? Well, I don't think this boss is completely irredeemable. I kinda like his rough and rocky design, and when I really thought about it, I wouldn't pair him alongside the trio of 1 out of 10 bosses in the original Hollow Knight. He isn't a soul-sucking experience the same way that those three are. After killing the first one and learning there'd be a second one, I thought, okay, maybe the harder version will be the guy I give a 1 out of 10. But no, this one was basically on par in quality, so they're technically tied in this ranking. And even though I'd say Lava Beastfly is slightly worse than Savage, they're basically the same experience. Just uninspired, frustrating bosses that have practically nothing to justify killing them, aside from a friendship bracelet and a crest that I've personally never found useful. You know what you could do instead? Sit down on a chair and slam your head against the wall for 10 minutes instead, because you'll get more enjoyment from that wall than Bob the Bitfly could ever give to you.
Now, from out of the blue, a totally new Kool-Aid flavor.
After two bosses that were horrible for being frustrating, let's move on to a boss that's horrible for how absolutely boring it is. One thing you'll notice in this boss roster is how much they experimented with enemies, many of which have unique gimmicks that require different methods than usual to take down. While I found myself enjoying a good number of these gimmick bosses, the worst of the bunch has to be Plasmified Zango. On paper, I actually really like the idea. Lifeblood is such an interesting concept in the Hollow Nest universe, being the blue raspberry Kool-Aid that heals you compared to the orange Kool-Aid that kills you. I like that this game goes further into the dark side of Lifeblood, showing it can be just as dangerous as the infection if spread too far. The infected wormways are such an interesting area as well, showing how all the wildlife has been infected by the excess of lifeblood, including the scientist who you helped collect Gatorade for, and he asks that you put an end to his previous assistant. The reason I'm going so much into the lore and atmosphere is because that's all the positives I have to say about Plasmified Zango. I was never a fan of the void enemies in Act 3, so I was not happy to see that this guy was basically a worse version. Even then, at least least the void enemies retain some attacks outside of their infection. Zango has nothing, only being able to spew Chug Jug, and when he's had enough of getting abused, he'll express his anger by sliding forward slightly. This thing is essentially a DPS check. He heals himself over time as you smack him, so you need to deal more damage than he heals to actually kill him. DPS checks are already gimmicks I tend not to like, but this is easily the worst implementation of it I've ever seen in a video game boss. At least with other DPS checks, there's a sense of pressure to actually meet the damage required, and they aren't there for the sole purpose of just wasting your time. It's a boss that requires no strategy or intelligence to beat it, just spamming the attack button and tanking hits until you eventually kill the thing. There is a second option to defeat this guy. You can use the Plasmo Needle to leech the blue blood out of him. Doing so cuts his maximum health down by a quarter, and doing it 4 times will instantly kill Zango. Even so, he's easily the most brain-dead boss in the entire game, and despite putting some bosses below him, at least those guys put up a fight, and I don't know, had at least more than 2 fucking attacks to work with. All in all, Plasmified Zango is far from the most annoying foe in Silksong, but it is one of the most nothing bosses I have ever seen in a Metroidvania. The only reason it's not at the bottom is because you have the option to end it in like 20 seconds. It's a boss with nothing to add. No rewards, no enjoyment, no artistry, no ambition, no bitches. You get nothing.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Everything's silk. Silk durag, silk robe. This is what I do. It's really not easy.
The Unraveled. More like the unraveling of my fucking sanity. The thing that surprises me the most is that I don't see anyone complaining about this sack of silk. Most rankings I've seen say that this boss is just okay or even good, which if that's the case, more power to you, but I cannot stand this guy one bit. What's funny is that I actually didn't mind it too much during the first minute or so. It wasn't amazing, but he's really not all that bad. And then we kept fighting, and we kept fighting, and we kept fighting, and we kept fighting, and we kept fighting. By the 4-minute mark, I wanted to throw this dude on the world's biggest spinning wheel. This monster is so tanky for no reason. He is a health bar that usurps almost every Act 2 boss, and there's so many factors that play into why this fight drags as long as it does. Before we get into that, let's talk about the design. I don't like it. The lore of this thing is actually pretty interesting. The Unraveled is essentially a manifestation of White Ward, this isolated lab used for the experimentation of silk, which led to the death and corruption of hundreds of different test subjects, who were all combined into this undying amalgamation, burdening the eternal pain of all these casualties. It's an incredibly creepy concept that has a lot of potential, but what we got was a 5XL bathrobe with a symbol on its head. As for the actual mechanics and battle, I'm equally not a fan. The fight starts with having to kill a mini gauntlet of silk enemies, which would be okay on its own, but every time you complete a phase with the actual boss, he burrows underground and summons another group of silkheads. At least he's not fighting with the minions, but it literally brings the pacing to a grinding halt. It's almost like a commercial break before each phase, so when you die to this guy and have to redo the battle, these commercial breaks become more and more of a tedious time waster. As for Unraveled himself, he alternates between 2 attacks. A charge that quite literally has no telegraph, and a spit attack where he fires 2 to 3 silk heads across the room at Mach speed. It's a losing battle either way. If you choose to stay at a distance, you'll get pelted by the silk spit that's way too sporadic to reliably dodge. If you choose to stay up close, you'll get run down by the charge with literally no windup. These attacks are just so cheap, and the lack of distinction between the two makes it a guessing game that more often than not leads to you getting smacked upside the head. The later phases don't even change much aside from the spears and burrowing, and a lot of these new mechanics just force you to wait until the boss lets you hit it. That's my biggest issue in general, the insane amount of downtime. Everything I've talked about so far, from the charging, to the burrowing, to the enemy gauntlets, makes this feel like a massive waste of time. But you want to know the insane thing? The thing that truly baffles me about the Unraveled. This monster is constantly hitting you with unfair attacks and kicking your ass, yet somehow, this boss is really easy. It makes no sense. This boss is somehow frustrating, boring, and easy. Those terms are mutually exclusive. They should not be used to describe the same damn monster. Yet this fat sack of silk is making me lose my damn mind. Okay, that's enough negatives. What stopped him from being ranked last place? The main thing I can give him credit for is the atmosphere. Whiteward is already a creepy maze, so dropping down to the lowest level and finding this empty dark pit definitely puts you on edge. And the name of the boss just appearing with no signs of an enemy makes this intro even more unsettling. There is also one aspect of the fight that I really do like and wish got put on a better boss: the spear attacks. By the second phase, large spears will pop up from the ground and turn to stab you from above. I love this part. It's predictable but fun to dodge, the sound design is dope, and they are an awesome addition to the battle overall. So there you go, the atmosphere, the lore, and the spears. That's 3 things that save this boss from being a 1 out of 10. Great job, Unraveled. Too bad everything else about you is god-awful. God, what to even make of Grohl the Great Pain in the Ass? Like seriously, what do I need to say about this amphibian that hasn't already been spewed out by almost the entire fanbase? Let's get something clear from the start. If we were counting the runback as part of critiquing the boss, Grohl would easily take last place on this ranking. Like, it wouldn't even be a debate. Biowater is such a horrendous area to traverse. From the maggots that prevent you from healing, to the obnoxious moss heads that constantly ambush you, to the mosquitoes and flies that explode in your face, to the constant traps and difficult platforming, it is easily my least favorite part of the entire game. It definitely isn't as bad as something like the Frigid Outskirts in Dark Souls 2, but then again, you'd have to give me a colonoscopy with a cactus to even compare to that frozen hell.
Damn!
There is part of the runback that I can critique Grohl for, because before you can even fight the fat frog, you have to take down the Shrek in the Swamp karaoke dance party. This might be the worst enemy gauntlet of any of these bosses, mainly because of how insufferable the goons of Biowater are, as well as the god-awful arena with maggot-infested water and toilet brushes swinging around. It takes all of this to finally get to the boss, and the reason I'm going so much into the runback is because this supposed great frog is really nothing special. I like his design a lot, and the idea of a shaman chief that is fattened from his gluttony of souls is a genuinely awesome concept. I also enjoy some of his attacks, like how he pulls a Kirby inhale to literally swallow you whole, requiring you mash buttons to escape, or the vengeful spirit balls in his second phase that are pretty satisfying to dodge through. However, some irritating qualities really bring him down, like the persistent contact damage and that instant dive attack that always manages to hit me. Grohl isn't even that bad on his own, it's just the horrendous arena, enemies, and runback that make him so notorious. It doesn't help that he will also summon groups during the fight, and even activate the toilet brush trap. The constant enemy gauntlets you have to fight while Grohl waits his turn is just as tedious, if not more so, than it was with the Unraveled. In fact, a lot of the issues I had with the Unraveled apply here, which doesn't make it a surprise why they ranked so closely. It's even more tedious considering that any time you die, which will be often, you have to go all the way back to that bench that is on the other side of the continent and go through that hell again. And guess what? After all of that and finally killing Grohl, the game immediately provides you with a bench. Thanks for that, Team Cherry. You couldn't have given it to us right before the boss? This area was apparently so amazing that we had to experience it this much? Isn't that so f***ing cool? Grohl is such an interesting case to me, because on his own, he's pretty inoffensive, but is turned into an insufferable boss by everything surrounding him. His arena and circumstances are more to blame than Grohl himself, and I guarantee that if he was copy-pasted into a different area, one without the runback or the maggots, he would not be hated to the insane degree that he is now. But it's not like Biowater gave me that much trouble. I mean, come on, I breezed through this spot easily. It wasn't even that bad. It wasn't that painful. How do you delete levels from a video game?
Oh my god, dude.
I'm actually gonna lose my mind. I'm actually gonna go insane. I'm going fucking insane. Please, just get there. Please, please. And we're back to the start. Okay, there's a bench. There's a bench. Just get there. Do I have to? Oh, thank God I don't have to pay any rosaries. Thank God. I should have fucking known. And then the bush knocked me into the maggots. If he hits me one more time, I'm throwing this controller out the window. I swear to God. Move, man! I must be schizophrenic. Where is this stupid bench?
Where the fuck is it?
The definition of insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
I'm fine.
Juan Carlos Boyer Garcia Sanchez Santa Maria La Niña Pinto Pacifico Benito.
Look at that. The fucking beginning.
I'm getting so mad. I'm getting so fucking mad. Fuck!
And we're back. Can't wait to do that all again.
I swear to fucking...
You know, it's not always about fun.
One pathetic sob story later.
There was a secret bench this whole time.
It's disgusting!
I'm pretty confident in saying that literally no one on this entire planet has ever asked, if Gruzmother is so good, why isn't there a Gruzmother too? Well, guess what, person that doesn't exist? Team Cherry's got you covered. Say hello to Broodmother, a chunky bug mama who got addicted to booger sugar and now all her kids have to suffer for it. Gruzmother was already a boss I had very little good to say about. So when I tell you that this one is even worse, that's not a good sign. The moveset is composed of only two things. One, birthing explosive babies that you can instantly escort to the afterlife, and
Drop on the deck and flop like a fish!
So it's basically Gruzmother without the excuse of being a tutorial boss and without the surprise of all of her babies breaking out. For one of the last foes you'll fight before Act 3, she is way too basic, and what little difficulty she provides comes from cheap mechanics and unfun attacks. Like Beastfly, she's a boss that deals 2 masks with all of her attacks for some reason, and has an annoying habit of getting you with contact damage. She also has an enemy gauntlet before her fight, but it's definitely one of the easiest ones, so I won't give her too much flack for that. I thought it would be interesting if the exploding babies did damage to her as well. Maybe she could smack them back at you and it becomes a fun game of tennis. But no, they're just slapped on as extra cannon fodder that drags the fight. She also has a spit attack that can keep you in place if caught, but she's not aggressive enough to actually take advantage of this. Her slamming and belly flops across the room are just annoying and don't feel satisfying to deal with. And then there's how she looks. And I'm pretty tolerant when it comes to gross or disgusting visuals, but this thing is just nasty. Not even in a good way like Vala Zok from Monster Hunter or the Rotten from Dark Souls 2, it's just plain gross. She looks like somebody pulled out a pile of lint from Jabba the Hutt's belly button and wrapped the top of it in flypaper. It's not the nastiest boss I've seen in these games, but damn does she cut it close. There's not a lot I can really defend about Broodmother. It can be satisfying to use some of the tools like the drill against her. I think she has some solid buildup with hearing her wails and cries as you traverse the slab, and she can be somewhat fun to smack around. But given how cool the concept of the slab is, this super prison that you yourself have to break out of, I think they could have created a far more interesting foe to take down. Broodmother is the definition of a plain bad boss, one that I found to be as insanely forgettable as she was insanely boring. She doesn't offer anything unique to the table, and all of her qualities are done better by bosses in both Silksong and Hollow Knight.
We see the deer in its natural habitat instead.
If I were to ever make an Elden Ring boss ranking, I would describe Regal Ancestor Spirit as a beautiful, highly underrated remembrance. An ancient stag-like being with gorgeous visuals, jaw-dropping music, a decently complex fight, and a somber atmosphere that makes you regret having to kill this beautiful creature. An immersive, otherworldly experience that takes my breath away every time I hunt it. Now take everything I just said, suck out nearly all the stuff that made it enjoyable, and you basically have the pale stag. I will say that the vibes of this stag hunt are really good, and makes killing this thing quite bittersweet. But god, is this one of the most tedious and draining battles you can have in Silksong. It's just a game of cat and mouse, chasing him around as he fires Cuphead boomerangs and teleports as far away as possible. There's not any other gimmicks or abilities that build on this, it's just a deer that teleports away and spams magic. That's it. Obviously, this is prioritizing spectacle over fight complexity, but when said complexity is as shallow as a brine-caked bird bath, you better have a mind-blowing spectacle to make up for it, and this just isn't that. In fact, there are several bosses in Silksong that not only capture a better spectacle than Pale Stag, while still having a solid fight, but also convey more emotion and tragedy to them. Pale Stag is an irritating boss that I want to like more than I actually do, but when you have such a tedious and mind-numbing fight, a solid atmosphere can only carry you so much. Even more so when I've seen this type of boss done so much better in not just other games, but this one as well, it's hard for me to actually defend this deer, let alone like it.
It ain't my fault he ran right in front of my truck.
If it weren't for Bob the Bitchfly, I would award this next pick as the king of contact damage. A boss that is quite unimpressive in design and combat, but tries to make up for it with enthusiasm. His name isn't quite coming to mind for some reason. Let me check my script real quick. Wait, what the hell is that noise? Oh shit! The big daddy of the smaller Skuller heads, Skull Tyrant is a boss that doesn't really do a whole lot for me. This is a good time to talk about the double damage issue with Silksong. I understand that they needed to balance out the triple healing Hornet now has, but it creates some annoying inconsistencies with certain enemies. A prime example is with this guy. Skull Tyrant deals double damage with every one of his attacks. But then you fight one of his little goobers, and they also do double damage. Like, logically, you're telling me that a cow-sized skull charging at you would do the same damage as a bulldozer-sized skull? I'm one of the few that believes basic enemies should do single damage while most bosses maintain this double damage, with obvious exceptions of course. That issue just stuck out the most with this boss because of that contradiction. As for the actual fight, he's about as basic and boring as you can get for a big bruiser. He charges, he drops boulders, and jumps. That's all the complexity found with bone bags. They could have added some bite attacks or a new fire breath or magma spit, but no, it's just the typical bullfight with no surprises to be had. It can also feel frustrating with the contact damage from him just walking around, but otherwise, it really is the monotonous fight that brings him down in my opinion. I actually like the design of the alpha with the big orange mouth and scuttly legs, but this boss is just the textbook example of inoffensive. The most unique thing about Skullcrusher is his second appearance I showed earlier, where he literally comes crashing into Bone Bottom and runs down your beloved NPCs, whose names aren't quite coming to mind right now. I personally love when video games have an event where the villain or a boss invades the hub and turns your once home into a battleground, so this was honestly a super neat surprise. I really wish that the only time you fought Skull Tyrant was during this ambush, because it would make him so much more memorable as an encounter, but because you've already fought him once and the second version doesn't change anything, it makes the surprise feel somewhat lacking. Even more so than other repeats like Savage Beastfly, I think this guy would be much better if he wasn't repeated. All in all, Skullcrusher is a boss with a decent design and ambush gimmick that gets held back by a bare bones fight along with some annoying contact damage.
Because tonight on Me and You, we serving you.
It's Chef Pepperjack from Skylanders Trap Team. Yes, dude, we love Chef Pepperjack, baby. The best villain in the game, the best cook in the kitchen, and the boss we're not talking about because Chef Legoli is up next. Damn it. Disgraced Chef Legoli sounds like a super fun boss in concept. A little bug fighting a giant chef in the kitchen? The amount of wacky hijinks with this could be hilarious. Something like the Little Mermaid scene with Sebastian, or the twin chefs you have to escape in Little Nightmares. Unfortunately, what we get is a pretty unimpressive and subpar boss fight. You start by ringing the dinner bell in this big kitchen, and the twin chefs have clearly not been given enough union allotted breaks, cause they're out to kill you for ordering past working hours. Also, don't they sound like Shy Guys? Anyways, the chef finally makes an appearance, and she turns out to really be nothing special. She's got 3 moves: throwing globs of maggots, a ground pound, and smashing you with her dump truck. I would complain about the double damage, but with that trash compactor, she really should just insta-kill you.
Get off him, Patrick!
What are you worried about? He looks better already.
For a concept with so much fun to be had, there's practically nothing to talk about here. Her attacks are basic and range from easy to kinda frustrating. Her maggot balls can be annoying with the ricochet physics, but pairing them makes it tolerable, and the dive attack near the end just drags the fight on for no reason. She also inflicts you with the maggots like how Biowatering Groll did, but it's not nearly as frustrating here. I would have loved to see her use different ingredients or tools as the fight progresses. Maybe she interacts with the kitchen to create hazards akin to Hornet's tools. But it's disappointing how inoffensive she ended up being. I really should have just talked about Chef Pepperjack because there is really nothing special about Aunt Fanny over here.
I'm a single mother with 3 kids. I could use a little compassion.
Being the introduction boss to such a highly anticipated game, Moss Mother has a lot riding on it to hook new players into this franchise, while also teaching them about the game's mechanics. Is she a great first exam that leaves players hungry for the rest of the game? Nope. Is she a terrible boss that fails to teach all the lessons a tutorial should teach? Nope. She's a perfectly meh introduction, and easily one of the most average starter bosses I have seen in a video game. Fighting the queen of all the area's minions is a staple boss in video games for a reason. I like the arena with all the little baby bugs in the back, and I think her design fits well with the Moss Grotto. Her music also goes way harder than it has any right to. She does a good job teaching you how to deal with aerial enemies, environmental hazards, and lets you practice pogos on her head and minions. But as a tutorial boss, Moss Mother is still way too easy and lacks complexity in her fighting kit. She only has 3 moves, and most overworld enemies provide more attacks and danger than her. You could give her extra stuff, like maybe a moss spit or some strikes where she stabs downwards, maybe add a gimmick where you could parry her minions or rocks back at her, because the fight feels very dull at the moment. Now you may argue that I'm being too harsh, but Team Cherry has proved that they can create much more effective intro bosses in the False Knight. This chunky fella does such a better job at teaching the basics of that game, and his leagues more interesting, replayable, and memorable than this oversized green bee could dream of. Otherwise, there's practically nothing else to say about Moss Mother. She does her job at being a target that gets killed, and doesn't provide much else of substance. At least she was better than Gruz Mother.
Prometheus does not have his liver mutilated every day for me to ignore the allure of arson.
Moving on to another gimmick boss, I can't see where the whole bottom tier slop arguments are coming from when regarding Father of the Flame. I can agree with the sentiment that he's kind of boring and has a few frustrating aspects, but not to the point where I consider him outright horrible, let alone below average. Instead of tools or your weapon arts, this is a boss that requires your use of platforming to take him down, bouncing on 4 fiery balls on its body to deal proper damage. He's a massive immobile scarecrow that doesn't attack you directly, but instead creates little fire wisps that will chase you down to commit first-degree arson on your face. Once you destroy all the weak points, your focus is to attack the center lantern while avoiding the wisps. Then keep your distance once he starts pelting fireballs all over the place. Rinse repeat until you kill the stack of straw and propane. I personally love Hornet's movement and nail hopping, so that may be the reason why I find bouncing on the different weak points to be so much fun. If you hated traversing the Hunter's March, you'll be wanting to guzzle gasoline by the time you're done with this scarecrow, which is likely why I've seen so much hate for him. I definitely have to give credit to how unique Arson Dad is in design and combat, and there's a neat bit of strategy to planning out which weak points you should target first while also avoiding the fire. This furnace golem does have some baggage that holds it back from being actually good to me. As mentioned, this thing doesn't do much aside from shoot fireballs at you, but these fireballs can be very questionable in both their tracking and hitboxes. This wouldn't be a major problem on its own, and the magma bell does exist, but it's actually the camera that makes this an issue. You'll sometimes just get pelted by a fireball that comes from off screen, which can ruin your entire flow and feel very unfair. The second phase is also a case of tedious keep away, having you avoid slow-moving fireballs and being the prime example of a your turn, my turn type of fight, which I have never been a fan of. I see people say that this is one of the harder bosses of Silksong, and I personally disagree with that. Sure, this is the only fight to not provide any silk and therefore no ability to heal, but this threat is not fast-paced enough to make that feel concerning. I also don't think the music fits with the boss or locale in general. Given how unsettling the atmosphere of Wisp Thicket is, I think they could have added a third phase to really build on this thing. Maybe have an actual creature come out of the scarecrow that you have to slay, like a fiery bug or some kind of ashen monster, because I really just want more from Arson Dad because I like the lore and the concept. The Fodder of Flame is ultimately a boss I found to be just alright, with some novelty and pretty fun aspects that are sadly brought down by some more tedious and unfun mechanics. But who doesn't love a good bit of arson, am I right?
What the f-
I, secret of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise.
This is a depressing one indeed. Going from a bunch of pretty basic Act 1 and 2 bosses to Lost Garmon is quite jarring, and I'm sure people will find it equally jarring why I have him so low on the list. But let me explain. Before I get serious and talk about the tragedy of this character and why it works so well emotionally, I want to talk about him just as a boss. When you separate the character of Garmon and look at him from an unbiased perspective, the fight itself sucks. I hope people agree with me on this. His attacks are mainly uninteresting stabs and swipes, and he mostly relies on the same annoying void attacks that most enemies have in Act 3. He doesn't even do anything to evolve on said void mechanics or his normal moveset. The difficulty comes from how fast his attacks pop out, rather than the actual mechanical complexity. After 20 seconds, you've seen everything he can do, and there's nothing done in the actual fight to convey his pain or suffering. The music doesn't fit at all either. It almost feels tone deaf when I think something like the OST for Seth would have worked way better. To put it simply, once you separate Garmon and his character from this encounter, it's a pretty subpar and sometimes frustrating boss battle. Now that's out of the way, the thing that balances this foe out is its emotional baggage and storytelling. Let me set the scene. You traverse Fairloom and come across a noble knight clad in armor. He goes by the name Garmon, with his noble steed Zaza by his side, and talks about his quest to avenge his home village, which was destroyed by darkness and left these two the only survivors. Whether it be their help against Morwing or assisting you in the Coral Chambers, these two are a duo that are always there to have your back. But I know how these stories end. A noble knight never gets a happy ending, yet knowing his fate didn't make it sting any less. Once Act 3 starts, Garmon is nowhere to be found. That is until you accept a side quest that recalls cries of anguish coming from the blasted steps, and go searching for what the source of the sound is. The only thing you find is Zaza, whose Needle dialogue reveals that something terrible has happened to Garmon. He leads you through this ruined region, and reveals a terrible tragedy. Garmon has been consumed by the dark. Infected by the void that you let break free. He died fighting the darkness that destroyed his village, the darkness that you caused. It's devastating to witness, but the most you can do now is put him out of his misery. And once you do and apologize for what you did, Garmon simply says two things. Fret not, little one, be proud you've grown so strong. Zaza, let us rest a little, then we'll be on our way. And he dies, fallen to the void. As for Zaza, his undying loyalty remains, and he simply rests beside his fallen rider. It's a sad fate indeed, but at least Garmon can rest, knowing he died a hero, a true hero.
And all of a sudden they started running up, so I pulled out my taser and I tased him in the throat.
Voltverm is a purple bundle of sea anemone that is insanely easy for how late in the story you encounter him. He's the generic lightning AoE guy, firing small circles of static shock or pillars of Viper tech to tase you into next week. All you have to do is smack him every time he pops up in the ceiling and you're good to go. He's a boss that really lacks complexity, and even if some worse bosses had annoying minions to throw at you, at least they had something to change up the fight. Voltverm just doesn't do anything beyond the basic premise of sea urchin testes with taser attacks. There are no surprises or things you'll even remember about this fella. It can be decently satisfying to dodge the thunder pillars, but the hitboxes linger for a bit longer than they should. Plus, the fight is simply too short, which could be because of how late you can fight him, but even then, I fought him in Act 2 and still found him incredibly easy. It also doesn't take a marine biologist to break down the strategy of this sea anemone. He may be an improvement over the last electric-powered sea life that Team Cherry has made, but overall, Voltverm is easily the most average boss in the entire game. His design is fine, his fight is fine, everything about this guy is just plain fine, without having any highs or lows that left a lasting impression on me. Luckily, these coral-ridden regions have some much better foes that we'll be getting to eventually.
Yes, it is. It's a pin.
Am I the only one who found Pinstress disappointing? Like, she's still a decent boss and I enjoyed myself to an extent, but given the amount of build-up and her weight as a character, I was expecting so much more. Pinstress is an NPC you encounter multiple times, being a nail master that teaches you many skills in combat, and her fighting style is reflected in a lot of Fairloom's residents. When the kingdom crumbles to void in Act 3, Pinstress takes a more nihilistic approach, ascending to the peaks of Mount Fae to await the end of the world. It's then that you meet her and she decides to have one final duel, a thrill against nail and needle before her life comes to an end. The lore and atmosphere is truly outstanding, but it's such a shame the fight is as disappointing as it is. She's basically a combination of the two crawl fighters, throwing pins from afar or thrusting her spear to close the distance. I find the overall rhythm to be slow and easy to the point of monotony. There's a noticeable lack of attack opportunities throughout the battle. You spend more time waiting for her to actually land on the ground, while she floats out of reach and throws pins that are very difficult to not dodge. And for some reason, pogoing her thrusts and dashes count as a parry, despite her weapon being nowhere near her head, which drags the fight out even longer. You can try to rush her down, but it gets tedious having to constantly dash after her, just for her to drop down or teleport to the other side of the arena for some reason. Your tools definitely help in keeping aggression, but that still doesn't stop how slow her tempo is, or how repetitive the duel becomes. The reason I find this so underwhelming is because Pinstress is such an important character. She's a nail master that teaches you the skills needed to survive in Fairloom, with you two even dueling as practice to learn these new skills. And the fight we end up getting is just so bland. It doesn't help that all of her attacks like the Big X or thrusting stabs are done better by bosses both before and after her. Pinstress is just a foe I wanted more from. The fight is not bad or frustrating, but it is underwhelming given the fantastic lore and setup. But hey, there's always the view. One of the big missions of the final act is retrieving a minimum of 3 old hearts from 4 ancient beings, each one being a former ruler of their own kingdom, which have all either fallen to ruin or degraded over time. Crust King Kong, Nihilith, the Clover Dancers, and Scar Singer Carmeletta. These 4 bosses are all given an insane amount of lore and gravitas, and you can feel their grand presence when you reach them. However, one of these 4 didn't quite stick the landing for me, especially given the supreme quality found in some of these guys, and that boss is Nihilith. I wouldn't call Nihilith a bad boss in the slightest, but there is a noticeable drop between my opinion on her and the rest of this geriatric quartet. This fight is very similar to the Father of the Flame, being a unique gimmick boss that more so requires your use of platforming and clever movement. Because of that, a lot of the pros and cons I had with Arson Dad apply here, but Nihilith is definitely different in many ways. She hangs from either the left or right wall and will lunge from side to side, covering the wall she's on in thorns that prohibit hanging above her. The first phase is all about learning what she can do as you stand on a small platform, which is mostly just her firing these slow-moving globs of earwax as spiky balls come from the thorns below. Then phase 2 comes around and there goes the floor. Now you have to stay on one wall while Nihilith stays on the other, and you're given 2 options for how to reign victorious. There's the platforming way, playing a hit and run tactic as you pogo on her head between attacks, and there's the tool way, staying put on the wall and firing projectiles at Nihilith from a distance. I personally tried both methods during my playthrough, and found myself being frustrated at times. Nihilith's constant keep-away attacks make trying to get Pogoza a pain. A boss doesn't need to sit there and let me hit it all the time, but when I'm only given 1 or 2 hits before she uses her pollen, it makes the fight feel tiresome. I also wouldn't mind this if Nihilith herself was more aggressive and had projectiles that were tricky to manage, but all of her attacks are incredibly basic and are mostly handled by slightly moving up or down. It's fun in the first phase to throw the spike balls back at her, but that's completely gone in the second phase, because there's a 90% chance the ball hits another one and accomplishes nothing. The spike balls and earwax also make the tool method tedious, since you often get your projectiles blocked by hers and waste all of your shards. I could complain about having to constantly skip up and down the wall, but the Ascendant's grip is a godsend and makes this a non-issue. Sadly, the battle just feels designed to drag on no matter what method you use, and it's not thrilling or complex enough to be worth that duration. As mentioned, I love Hornet's platforming, so I do find weaving in and out to be decently fun. I just can't help but get frustrated by some of the tedium found with her mechanics. It's hard not to be disappointed when comparing her to the other 3 old ones, who all outshine her in spectacle, narrative, and mechanical satisfaction. Hell, even Seth, the guardian protecting her and the one who's supposed to be an appetizer before the main course, surpasses her in nearly every aspect. I simply found myself forgetting Nihilith was even in the game, especially compared to Seth. There are a lot of good qualities I can say. The design is overall beautiful and really captures the forest nymph motif they're going for. I especially like that she resembles a wilted flower when you deal a knockdown, and her intro with the radiant lighting and pearly flowers gives the impression of facing a poised angel. And the music is still as lovely as it was with Seth, and fits her just as well with the added composition. I unfortunately just didn't click with this fight and found it to be a letdown, yet I still don't think she's remarkable enough to consider her better than a boss like Khan or Carmeletta. I do think Nihilith has replay value given how unique she is and the multiple methods you use to defeat her, and after seeing others absolutely destroy her with certain tool matchups, I definitely want a rematch and see if I enjoy her with a different strategy. I still don't want to be too harsh though, since a second playthrough would likely skew my thoughts from neutral to positive. Nihilith is ultimately an enemy I'm quite conflicted on, having some solid potential and many features unique to itself, but some frustration I had with her mechanics prevented me from putting her any higher.
You get your feet back on the ground now!
Let's get into a more controversial opinion of mine. I don't get the hatred for Morwing. He's a boss I'm certainly mixed on in many ways, but I was shocked by the sheer unabashed rage people have for this flying pest. So much so that they nerfed him as opposed to Grawl or Bob the Big Fly. The best reason I can deduce is that he was too strong for how early you take him on, and that he was mandatory, but I personally never struggled the same way that a lot of people seem to. However, I still don't like Morwing and think he's a pretty mixed bag overall. The biggest complaint I could give is definitely the flying. I know the dude is a literal giant fly, but he will never touch the ground willingly. This isn't inherently bad, but that, along with his mobile attacks, make trying to smack him a pain. The worst is when he instantly falls to the ground after getting KO'd, so if you're underneath him during that, you get hit with the good ol' insta double damage. As for his moveset, it's honestly pretty simple once you know what to look for. When he opens his mouth, that means he's gonna kick at you. When he backs away, you know he's gonna fire 2 buzzsaws at the ground. When he turns his head down, you know he's gonna dive towards you. Even the buzzsaws are consistent the entire fight, either rolling forward on the ground or bouncing off each other depending on the attack. All of his attacks are fair and clearly telegraphed, to the point where I don't see the whole bullshit argument aside from the downtime and double damage. Visually, Morwing doesn't do much to impress me. I find his design kind of boring, not really doing anything creative beyond giant fly monster. The flickering streetlights and dark rainy sky create a solid eerie mood found throughout Greymoor in general, but I think they could have made an actual arena with platforms that allow you to punish in more engaging ways. My last reason for not placing him higher is because he really has nothing memorable that sticks with me. He's a boss that mostly just came and went, and I found myself forgetting that he was even in the game, especially compared to earlier foes that had much more impact. For an enemy that people seem to so passionately despise or defend in this game, Morwing's a boss I ended up feeling nothing towards, not in a positive or negative way.
It's just a
little Splinter!
What do you know? We went from a decent early game boss that was nerfed for some reason to a decent early game boss that was nerfed for some reason. While Morwing is a foe that was all around average, Splinter is a foe that has some good qualities balanced out by some bad qualities. Starting with positives, I like the buildup of her closing off the exits with her thorny vines, and she stands out as a foe that hangs from the ceiling. Despite literally being wooden in appearance, I think her design is pretty unique in the world of Farloom. I also really like the lore here. After the passing of Nihilith, the original guardian of the forest, Splinter and her kin took control of Shellwood, though whether she actually killed Nihilith or simply took advantage of the opportunity is up for debate. As for the actual fight, I have some more mixed thoughts. Dodging the claw slams can be satisfying, and I like the mechanics of her vines in general. They block off the arena and force you to either slice them apart or make do with the limited space you got. It's not amazing or complex, but I was having a fun time, until the goons came in. I've made complaints about minion ganks before, but this might be one of the worst cases of minions in the entire ranking. In the second phase, these two daughter splinters can be summoned at any time, who not only deal double damage, but always manage to perfectly corner and combo you. Despite how much the minions resemble their leader, they feel slapped on to increase the difficulty instead of being an essential part that flows with the main boss. Aside from that, Splinter does have the same issue that Morwing did regarding contact damage, where getting KO'd will have her fall on you and deal 2 masks. However, it's not as big of an issue with Splinter because she has a more obvious tell. Although I've been negative for the past minute, I feel that my experience was mainly soured by the circumstances. The nerf to Sister Splinter actually reduced the minion's damage to only 1 mask, which would have saved me a lot of pain. I also didn't have Threadstorm by the time I had reached Splinter, and that most definitely would have been a godsend to have. So while I have issues with Sister Splinter, I do want to be more forgiving since a lot of it came from issues that wouldn't nearly be as bad on a second playthrough. But with Splinter done, we're finally getting into the bosses I consider above average. The 6 out of 10s are higher, and I couldn't be more excited.
I got a new dog! His name is Ada!
The Bell Beast is a precious little fella, this adorable, endearing girl that must be protected at all costs. A truly perfect being that no one else in this game could even compare to. Then I remember this is a boss ranking and Bell Beast is a lame boss. Make no mistake, the Bell Beast is an incredible companion in Silksong, but as a boss, she's definitely lacking in many areas. I really don't feel I need to get into why her design and aesthetic are so good, because everybody loves this goober. She is the perfect blend of ferocious and adorable. I also really like the concept. Having a monster that burrows through masses of bells to traverse the environment is a great idea for your transport across Fairloom, and requiring Hornet to tame the beast for transport as opposed to the friendly stag and Hollow Knight is a nice change of pace. Unfortunately, the lackluster fight really brings her down, even as the second boss. Her phase 1 moveset is nearly identical to the massive Moss Charger, which if you don't know, is one of the most infamously boring encounters in Hollow Knight. All she does is jump and slide across the screen, barely requiring any skill to avoid getting hit. Luckily, the second phase makes things a bit more fun, having bells that fall from the ceiling that require you actually pay attention to her attacks. She's mainly here to reinforce the lessons of pogoing and walking forward slightly to avoid attacks, while also introducing you to bells that you can dodge or knock away, something that becomes much more essential with later bosses. I personally find the fight to be too monotonous for its own good, and the lessons taught here are honestly better taught by the platforming and overworld enemies. That's mainly what holds this fella back from being high on the list. The Bell Beast is an amazing animal, but not an amazing boss. She's a lovely companion that I enjoy exploring Fairloom with, but I never want to re-experience the boss fight. Not because she is precious, which she is, but because the battle is just not exciting. But okay, listen, you want to know why Bell Beast is so low on the list? We can't pet her. That's the reason why. You're telling me the people behind this game, made an entire Act 3 beyond the base final boss, but didn't let us pet the Bell Beast? We need to reassess our priorities, Team Cherry.
Mother knows best, take it from your mumsy.
If you thought one Moss Mother was bad, you'll probably never get to this boss. Moss Mother Duo puts you up against 2 green bees from the very start of the game. likely 2 soccer moms who are hosting a playdate for their little angels. You crash the party and they decide to use their brats as cannon fodder. What's 17 more children, I suppose?
Make another kid.
You start out fighting one, and the second won't join until after 30 seconds. They aren't given any new attacks, but their swoops come out way faster than before, and they summon a lot more boulders and minions to keep the pressure on you. Compared to a lot of the crappy gank bosses in Silksong, I actually quite like this one and find it to be an improvement over the original. Not only does the intensity of 2 bosses make for a much more engaging fight, but I think that it does a good job in letting you use the tools you've been given so far. The floaty cloak and silkbind attacks are both incredibly useful in this battle, and make it so that you can prevent chaos as long as you stay aggressive and mobile. They both give you plenty of opportunities to attack, and if you're quick enough, you can prevent the gank from even lasting 30 seconds. On top of that, you can constantly pogo off enemies to avoid the danger zone, making for a surprisingly fun time. It's similar to jumping on enemies to get 1-ups like in Mario or Donkey Kong. Obviously, it isn't an amazing fight, they still only have 3 attacks, but this is a prime example of taking an easy early game boss and creating a later version that challenges you despite the new mechanics you've learned. I wasn't expecting to give credit to the Moss Mother matriarchy of all things, but color me impressed.
Monster! You killed my...
What's that thing on your head? Looks like my grandmother's boobies.
Another duo boss that summons minions in a cramped room. In other words, the sky is blue, or rather orange from all the lava. Cygnus and Groin were one of those battles that wasn't super difficult, but just kept killing me for no reason. Not helped by how long the run back was, even with the shortcuts unlocked. The first phase starts out simple. Brother Sinus has only 2 attacks with his 2-handed lava glaive, and the lava falls prevent you from wall climbing or taking a breather. His bucket head prevents aerial attacks from landing, and once you learn a hit and run tactic with this guy, it becomes pretty easy to manage. But then Sinus summons his pretentious tin goons to help fight you, which is certainly more fair than say Sister Splinter, but is still a tedious experience that doesn't add anything to this boss. The metal minions don't flow into the battle or mesh with the brothers' attacks, and brings the fight's pace to a screeching halt. Luckily, once you progress far enough, he stops summoning minions and his brother Groin joins the duel, an annoying spear chucker you are all too familiar with, due to an earlier encounter in the deep docks. Now you'd assume based on my earlier complaints that this is when the fight becomes abysmal, but this is actually my favorite phase by a long shot. Brother Sinus utilizes melee strikes and a disc spin that forces you to stay high, while Brother Groin has a close-up AoE and can throw explosive spears from afar. They create constant opportunities to punish while still keeping you on your toes, making for a surprisingly solid duo fight. Then you finally take Sinus down and the battle turns into a 1v1 between you and Groin, with lava now falling down in the middle of the arena. It's crazy how the lava is all this one-on-one needed to still maintain pressure, despite being easier than the duo. It really is a shame the minions are so prevalent because this would otherwise be in the great tier. The fight develops over time, has a duo with 2 distinct enemies, and is far more mechanically fair than I expected. Aside from that issue and a lack of lore, another problem with this encounter is the length of it. This fight takes longer than most story-focused bosses for some reason, and they don't do enough to make it worth that duration. All they would need to do is remove the minion summons, have the first phase stay the same, maybe give Sinus like 1 or 2 extra attacks, then have the duo and final one-on-one be the second and third phase respectively, and spread out the health bars for each of those 3 phases. Boom, you have a legitimately premium boss on your hands. The lava falls can also be a pain at times, especially when you get smacked by Cygnus into the orange Fanta and lose about 4 masks in 2 seconds. Word of advice, get the magma bell from the big blacksmith. Not taking double damage at all is a godsend in any fight. With how fun some phases can be, I think the 4 brothers had the potential to be much higher on the list, but the issues with downtime and the first phase really holds this one back.
You triggered my trap card!
Gur the Outcast. Oh, this tricky little Fairloom isn't exactly known for its good Samaritans and considerate citizens, but this bastard is on a whole nother level. It takes a special kind of scoundrel to not only hunt you down, but literally set up a fake side quest to let you come to him. You accept the side quest without a second thought, and track down this large bush-like creature across the far fields. I was worried I was gonna have to fight a massive moss charger again, but these homemade shurikens that pop up on the trail show that what you're facing is much more intelligent than that bushhead. You continue the hunt, picking up clue after clue, and hope to find your prey sooner than later, but something's not quite right. You aren't the hunter, you are the hunted, and you've fallen right into his trap. It's an awesome subversion of expectations, and pulled me right under the rug. Literally. The lore is also incredible as well. This ant assassin was once a member of the Scar, but whether it be a lust for the hunt, or hunting some of his own kind, he was banished from Carmeletta's kingdom. But this hasn't stopped Gur's hunt one bit, as his trophy room shows a variety of different foes he has slain and mounted on his wall, from Greymoor guards to warriors up in the Citadel. His Needle dialogue even reveals that he views you as a pale prey, this prize stag that'll make the crown jewel to his collection. It's such an awesome enemy from a lore and build-up perspective. It's just a shame the fight's such a letdown. Yeah, I find this hunter's battle to be disappointing. It's still fun in many ways. I especially like activating traps with my tools to even the odds, but I simply wanted more from him. His only main ways of attacking are throwing out shurikens like the ones seen before, which will pop out over time or instantly if attacked, these pounces where he emerges from underground to deal contact damage, and these spike traps that sprout out over time. They're not bad attacks per se, well, except the contact damage, that bullcrap gets frustrating real quick, but it's still unremarkable. Within 2 minutes of fighting this guy, you've already experienced all he has to offer, which, considering how surprising the lead up was, makes this such a shame. It just becomes repetitive at a certain point and incredibly easy in difficulty, to the point where I question why he's even an Act 3 boss. Given Hornet's variety of tools, I wish Gur had a similar supply of tricks up his sleeve. Maybe some blow darts that he could poison you with, smoke bombs to blind you, bear traps on the ground that snap you in place, throwing knives that you can parry back at him. There's so much you can do with this kind of enemy. Just give Gur a Mossberg 500, give the hunter a 12-gauge shotgun, and let Hornet have that buckshot. Like, come on. Outcast Gur is a boss with so much potential given his amazing concept and lead up, but the execution on the actual battle leaves so much to be desired. Like Tormented Trobio or Sisters of Battle, I really hope we get an upgraded version of this guy, maybe with more tools and mobility at his disposal, because I believe that an Outcast Gur with a perfected fight could easily rival some of the best bosses in these games.
This copyrighted conch is the cornerstone of our organization!
Would you look at that? The drill power-up from Mario Galaxy 2 got turned into a boss in Silksong. The coral conch flies are a perfect example of a rock-solid 6 out of 10. A fun, simple encounter that doesn't do anything to blow me away, but also doesn't have any major flaws. Team Cherry really seems to love these synchronized duos, and being the first one you encounter makes these guys a bit more memorable to me. The supposed parents of those dick-sucking missile shooters in the Blasted Steppes, these two are far more tolerable than their children and actually synchronize well with their attacks. They mainly drill through the walls of the arena, popping out in different directions that force you to position yourself safely. Learning to weave through their strikes and counter back whenever you can makes for a fun experience akin to the best gank bosses in these games. I also like their designs with the red spearheads and tiny cute eyes. They work well in displaying the remnants of this once beautiful coral reefland, now turned into a desolate sanded wasteland. The thing that holds these two back is that they may not have any bad elements per se, but nothing about them is truly great or outstanding. They only have the drill spit and the burrowing to get you, and lack any second phase or enraged mode that evolves in the fight as it goes along. It also doesn't help that once you progress enough in this game, there's a certain rematch with a conch fly that kinda takes away any reason to want to go back to this fight in comparison. The Hollow Knight games do a decent job of not having a boss be overshadowed by its later version, but these two are unfortunately an exception. The coral conch flies are a simple and solid duo that could do to be a lot more impressive, but as seen in one of the conch flies surviving the battle, fleeing and yelling in anger, this match is only an appetizer to the main course of raw conch.
That's right, you ugly little girl! I hate you! I'm taking everything from you! Give me your phone!
I tend to appreciate bosses that take a risk and fail a lot more than those that play it safe and copy the success of a previous one. They're usually never subpar or bad, but everything good about them is something the original already had, making them often feel unnecessary. And I can't help but feel that way towards the Clover Dancers. For some context, 2 powerful and loving warriors ruled over the beautiful land of Verdania. It was a glorious green landscape full of unique flora and fauna, one you get to see in its full glory with the Needlin. However, Grandmother Silk was slowly consuming the kingdoms around her, and Verdania looked to be next on the list. Because of this, one of the Green Princes gave a peace offering to the Citadel, his own life in exchange for Verdania's safety, showing how the Clockwork Dancers came to be. But of course, Grandmother Silk didn't keep up her end of the deal. Verdania soon decayed into nothing but cold, dark caverns. You follow the surviving Green Prince as you progress the game, with him grieving over the death of both his lover and home. It all culminates in entering the dreams of the Green Prince, seeing what Verdania once was, and the Green Prince attacking you after having enough of your indecency. I totally understand why he decides to kill you. If anyone is justified in doing that, it's him. You invaded his dream and laid waste to all of its residents and wildlife, as he's grieving over his lover. It's one of the most captivating stories in the entirety of Silksong, and the main reason why this boss is so high on the list. As mentioned at the start, I find the actual fight to be disappointing, as it's nearly identical to the Clockwork Dancers. There's only one dancer, but he decides to pull a Great Tiger, summoning a magic clone of himself that can attack you, but you can't attack it, forcing you to prioritize the living one. What makes other repeats like Tormented Trobio work is that they change the mechanics, they increase the speed, or add new attacks and gimmicks that evolve on the battle, making it a distinct upgrade. Meanwhile, the only new aspects about Clover is the projection mechanic as mentioned, and this new whirlwind attack they do instead of the original slash twirl, requiring much more nimble movement to avoid. But that's all there is, and this version is missing most things that made Clockwork such an emotional tour de force. The music that timed with the attacks, how both the battle and OST progressed over time, and especially not having that final phase really takes away a lot of what gripped me about the original. I still had fun fighting this duo, it's based on the dancers so of course it's gonna be a blast, but it feels like they played it safe with basically duplicating the exact same fight, but it somehow feels easier given how much you've progressed in the game. I don't think this needed to be a boss fight, plain and simple. It would have been so much more poetic if the Green Prince simply accepted his fate, finally letting his grief go and moving on to the afterlife, in hopes to see his lover again. If you really needed one that bad, just have there be a unique boss blocking your way to the Green Prince. It feels like Team Cherry saw that this memory counted as a great heart, and put this together at the last minute to avoid players taking the easy way out and skipping a heart boss. However, they do have many of the good qualities found in Clockwork Dancers, so they're still a fun time. I just can't help but feel let down by the Clover Dancers, despite how amazing their narrative is.
I'm talking about plastic surgery. Let's get into it. I want to talk about it.
I think for this one I should go a bit deeper into the lore, because it's important for the next entry on the list. A long time ago, Fairloom was an untamed land ridden with webs and ancient spider-like creatures. It wasn't until a goddess known as the Pale Monarch completely changed this region. She captured multiple spiders and transformed them into beings known as weavers, to create a world of her liking. A world built on a religion crafted entirely to her worship. A world built by lesser beings while she stands atop of a massive citadel ruling it all. A world all to her benefit. The kingdom was torn to shreds long before Hornet arrived, because the Weavers had learned about their origins, and chose to rebel against the Pale Monarch, trapping her in a massive cocoon of silk. As shown in Hollow Nest though, you can only trap a god for so long. As she begins to awaken and manipulate the minds of Fairloom's people, she needed Silk to bring her back to her former glory, and sent seekers to capture creatures that could provide her with said silk. Which brings us to why Hornet was captured at the very start. Throughout this entire game, you've seen the Pale Monarch's influence over this kingdom, the biomes she's destroyed, the weavers and children she has made, the pilgrims she's sacrificed, and the world she's turned to ruin. It's all been leading you to finally put an end to her domain, at the very top of Fairloom, her cocoon of silk beating like a heart, and breaking it open reveals a single name. That was a hell of a tangent, but I think it's important to know the lore to feel the gravitas of this boss. As for the design, it definitely has the presence of a literal deity, especially with the lack of facial features despite how human her anatomy is. Speaking of which, Grandmother Silk is the first bug in the Hollow Knight universe to get plastic surgery. This looks like a goddamn ant. Somebody's gotta say it. Tell me I'm wrong.
Big ass head, little neck, hard chest, skinny waist, fat ass.
I think this might be a metaphor for the dangers of plastic surgery. Go too far with cosmetics and you end up looking like this thing. Okay, that's enough tangents for one section. Let's get into the actual fight. You'd assume based on my praises I've given that she should be higher, but the fight is just so underwhelming. I get why it isn't that intense, because it's not the real final boss, and you have to kill her multiple times to get different endings. But I still think it's disappointing. She mainly uses rows of needles that are thrown horizontally or vertically, and that's pretty much most of the battle. She has a claw swipe that you can jump over, and an awesome grab attack that takes 3 masks. But aside from some environmental hazards like the rocks and spiked floor, the fight doesn't change or develop in any interesting ways. Hell, even the Weaver bosses we fought before her were far more engaging with their movesets. The reason First Sinner is a much better battle in my opinion is because the rows of needles thrown are the icing on the cake. The cake being the physical moveset and gimmicks, such as the healing, the runes, and teleporting. Meanwhile, Plastic Mama Silk doesn't have any other mechanics to build on these needles. It maintains its lukewarm energy the entire time, and never feels like a final challenge to test your wit. I could excuse this if the easy fight played into the boss's character or storyline like it did with the titular Hollow Knight, but it really doesn't. So yeah, the Pale Monarch is amazing from a visual and storytelling standpoint, but falls pretty flat as an actual boss. It had everything but a good fight.
And these stupid fuckers are going, ooh, 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 at 7 in the fucking morning, like, who are you calling to?
In case you didn't know, I love birds. They are incredible, gentle,
you went wrong,
peaceful, majestic animals that are always misunderstood by people. Well, except geese, those bastards deserve to die in hell. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Crawfather. The Court of Craws is certainly a unique encounter, from the entire aesthetic to the interesting yet bizarre setup. Greymoor is a dreary locale known for 2 things, its resemblance to England and the friendly local Craws. An entire civilization of what looks like crows, but are actually just bugs that bear a resemblance to corvids. A group of crows is commonly called a murder, and these guys prove that term quite accurate, because dealing with massive groups of them is quite literally a death wish, especially given each type has its own fighting style you have to adjust to. By the time you get into Act 3, these bugs are nothing more than cannon fodder to tear through, but like corvids, they turn out to be much more intelligent and capable of holding quite a grudge. After unleashing the Abyss on Fairloom and leaving it in ruins, the Craws blame you for the collapse of this world, and you receive a letter from the courthouse telling you to show up as a jury or be taxed of all your rosaries. So you show up to this courthouse, and it turns out that you're the defendant, not the jury, and the Crawfather has already deemed something worthy of your sins.
Trial by combat.
Thus begins the fight. It starts out having to tackle multiple waves of Craws, now with metal crowns that prevent aerial strikes and requiring a more strategic approach. This is definitely the weakest part in my opinion. It's not bad or frustrating, tools play a big part in preventing that. I just find it boring having to cut down waves of the same enemies you fought before to even try the boss. The gauntlet honestly lasts longer than bosses like Unraveled or Groll, but unlike those two, there's no downtime once the Crawfather actually shows up, so that makes it far more tolerable. As for the biggest bird himself, his moveset isn't all that captivating, but I do find it pretty satisfying to learn. The impact of all the attacks and the impeccable sound design mainly play into that. But then the little birds start swarming in, and it all starts to click as you learn to manage both. The difference between this and something like the minions in Four Brothers is that the Craws synergize super well with the Crawfather, as Big Bird has more grounded and slow stabs, while the little birds stay high above and catch you by surprise. It's a fight that demands your mastery of crowd control, or should I say, Crawd control. Get it? Because craw and then crowd. I do wish that they focused more on making the Craw Father a more complex fight, rather than having the little craws fill that void. Especially with some moves, like when he sprouts chains out in different directions, they could have made Craw Father a lot more interesting in both what he did and how to take him down. However, I do appreciate that they put effort into creating a flow between the Craw Father and his court. Then, after finally slaying Big Bird, the rest of the murder abandoned the court and dismissed the charges against you. Generally, I really enjoy Court of Craws for the build-up as well as the arena and lore. And while the fight itself is far from perfect, I still think it's a well-designed gank battle. I know some people were not a fan of this boss, but I really did enjoy Big Bird, especially since the last boss I've had to talk about with Black Bird minions was less than stellar. Chomp on my dead corpse and I failed a quest. This is such a fun f***ing quest. Wow, I am having the time of my motherfucking at the edge of a universe humming a tune. What lies beyond the edge of the world is a question you'll likely ask in most video games. Sometimes it's an ominous fog that devours any ship that enters. Other times it's a bottomless void of nothing but water and some friendly local leviathans. Whoa! Baby! And if you're a flat earth theorist, it's the big ice wall that sunk the Titanic, obviously. But in the Hollow Knight universe, it appears to be nothing but howling winds, desolate sands, and bugs who've lost themselves long ago. Perhaps Fairloom and Hollow Nest are just anthills to a much larger world. Or perhaps they're the only living remnants of a now apocalyptic landscape. There is one character who likely asked himself these questions, because when your job is to endlessly watch the edge of a kingdom, how else are you supposed to keep your mind occupied?
What are you doing?
I'm watching.
Watcher at the Edge is an interesting secret foe. He's a knight tasked with guarding the border of Karak, this once glorious coral kingdom now turned into a windswept wasteland. Despite Karak eventually falling to ruin, this warrior never left his post, and is the last living remnant of this civilization. It reminds me of the Dark Souls 3 DLC, with that one ringed knight that remains in the future, the last remaining survivor of a kingdom now ground to ash. Aside from the lore, the biggest pro I can give Watcher is indisputably the atmosphere. This barren flat landscape over a never-ending sandstorm, and especially the fact that he's the only boss to lack music, creates an entirely unique vibe, with only the sounds of exchanging blows and sand being kicked up to fill the silence. The fight is also an incredibly solid duel. His sword strikes have a ludicrous amount of range and speed, but leave him vulnerable and makes parrying quite satisfying. I love that it encourages different playstyles, either by dodging away and using the claw line to close the distance, or by staying up in its face and timing your parries. His ability to block your attacks demands patience in a satisfying way, and he's very engaging due to his constant aggression and ability to face you on a dime. Otherwise, I don't have much else to say about this guy. He's about as simple and effective as you can get for a one-on-one duel against a ruined knight, but is also basic to a fault, like you've seen everything he has to offer by the first minute. Also, how in the hell were we supposed to know to use the Silksong at this exact spot? Even with bosses I couldn't find until I searched online, I at least understood how somebody would stumble into them. But you cannot convince me you found this boss without using the internet. Like, don't even try to persuade me.
Yo guys, it's me, Charlie. Hey, did that guy just turn into sand?
Yeah, what was that?
You can shine no matter what you're made of.
This match will get red hot. You're up!
I can't be the only one who got massive Cuphead vibes from this guy, both in design and combat. The fourth chorus is a great time, and the first boss that truly felt cinematic. It took until fighting this bucket of bolts to realize that we really lacked any giant atmospheric bosses in the original Hollow Knight, as most of them were either humanoids or medium-sized monsters. Radiance was the only exception to this rule that I can think of, so it's refreshing to see an encounter like this in Silksong. You walk past this pile of scraps earlier in the far fields, and progress without a second thought. But once you unlock that floaty cloak from the local weaver, Bigwell decides to make you his problem. He essentially serves as a pop quiz, making sure you properly know how to use the floaty cloak before progressing the game. I think he's an excellent teacher for this new tool, with the lava and breakable platforms demanding that you stay afloat to not get singed. and even having air vents that you can use to finally defeat this iron giant. It actually took 2 minutes of me fighting him to realize that you're supposed to float up the air vents and drop the molten boulders. I only have the best situational awareness after all. It's a fight that feels big and bombastic while also being simple and learnable. It could be tedious having to constantly jump up to strike his head, but the lack of contact damage and how open he leaves himself after attacks makes this much more enjoyable than say Morwing or Sister Splinter. I love the arena and entire aesthetic of this Robo-Wrecker. Big Weld looks entirely unique from any past enemies you fought, but still feels like he naturally fits the story and setting, and it's further shown later on when you see that multiple of these things were being built by the same architects, an NPC that you can actually talk to. His fighting technique is also just as unique. He moves less like a Hollow Knight boss, and more like a boss from a Metroid or Donkey Kong game, with obvious telegraphs and big sweeping yet punishable attacks. However, the delays before each attack never feel unfair or made to purposefully throw you off, mainly because of the massive punish windows and how it is quite literally an inorganic automaton. The music is incredible as well, with the choir and bombastic brass perfectly capturing the grandiose atmosphere of this battle. My only complaint would be that there is a noticeable lack of moveset variety. Some combo extensions that demand more precise dodging would have gone a long way.
Knockout!
The fourth chorus is an all-around fantastic boss that captures a surprising amount of spectacle and atmosphere for an early game encounter, and I appreciate that they took a different approach to this guy that mostly paid off. I would have put him in peak tier if he was voiced by Mel Brooks.
I will be your nemesis.
Oh, cool. Glad we could help.
Rivals are a common staple found in video game bosses. Having a foe that challenges you over and over creates such a personal feud within the player, not just to continue progressing the story so you can face them again, but that feeling of finally learning to overcome this once daunting foe can be immensely satisfying. While Hornet herself was a pretty solid one in the original Hollow Knight, her own personal rival proves to be far more of a threat in this game. It's time to finally talk about Lace. Lace is one of the absolute highlights of this game's roster, serving as both a cocky rival to knock down a peg and a tragic character that reflects the downfall of her kingdom. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about our first encounter, the weakest of the three, but still a damn solid fight. I'll take this time to talk about her design. I really love her Edna Mode look with the bob hair, black and white color aesthetic, golden pin for a sword, and circular stature that some fans are way too down bad for. It's a simple design that doesn't feel as imposing as Hornet's, but will quickly prove doubters wrong when shown her insane speed and vicious attack style. I love that even if you skip her dialogue, a lot of her personality is conveyed in her fighting technique. From her parries and jumping strikes to her counters and dodges, she conveys grace and refined elegance while still being cocky and impatient. It's clear that she's big for her britches, but still has the skill and danger to back it up. Lace is definitely your first exam, making sure you've nailed all of the basics in both mobility and combat. She's the first boss with combo extensions, the ability to evade your attacks, and most notably, a counter that deals 2 masks if hit. And she will spam this counter over and over and over and over and over again. What makes the counter work is that it encourages you not to be impatiently dumb. Once you understand that, you can use it to either recover and heal or properly punish. She's got some other fun mechanics too, like a flurry of slashes that gives a fair and telegraphed danger zone, and the fact that you can knock her in the orange Fana below, which is hysterical. And Jesus Jelly Jamboree, does the music go so hard on this fight. It does for all of her battles, but this was the first track in the game that got completely stuck in my head. I love it to bits. We still have plenty of Lace to discuss in this ranking, but her first encounter is an absolute thrill, and definitely one of the most fun bosses early game has to offer, and she's only gonna get better from here.
You kill me. Copyrighted content.
Prepare to die.
Raging Conchfly is proof that sometimes it doesn't take a lot to upgrade a fight in both quality and difficulty. After returning to the sands of Karak and traversing further into this precarious canyon, an old friend comes to greet you before reaching the Coral Tower. It's the Conchfly from the Blasted Steppes, and he definitely hasn't forgotten the face of his lover's killer. In fact, he seems to have rallied the entire village against you, as several smaller Conchflies will aid their leader throughout. The battle doesn't add any crazy new attacks or mechanics that weren't already in the Great Conchflies. All it does is turn the intensity from a 6 to a 12, and that's all it needs. The pace of the fight is electric, giving you the smallest of openings to weave through his charges and spits, and the now cramped arena forces you to deal with his attacks head on. This is also a solid example of having minions that actually flow with the main boss. The Conchflies will all synchronize together and pop out with their leader, making you have to worry about up to 5 drill missiles as opposed to 2. It's a deadly game of tic-tac-toe, having to find just the right position to avoid both the big guy and the little ones, a game that I absolutely adore. All my other praises of the Great Conchflies apply here. It's just the improved fight and intensity that are enough to bump it into the Great tier. I appreciate that they made a beast fight feel just as thrilling and lightning fast as the humanoid ones, as well as giving a Conchfly of all things a personality, while also paying off an earlier boss you defeated. Its lack of complexity or progression in the fight are the only things holding this guy back. But regardless, I've grown quite a soft spot for this bipolar conch. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe out the field. Now onto a boss I love and think deserves way more adoration than they have gotten from the fanbase. Act 3 is a terrifying place to be in. You wake up to find Fairloom in complete shambles after being overcome by the Abyss. The entire world is in utter decay, and it all rests on Hornet's stubby, tiny hands to fix it. Most of your companions are either infected by Void or gone without a trace. Bone Bottom has been completely decimated, and the other places you've called home don't fare much better. Enemies that were once cannon fodder are now terrifying after being infected. And the one that stood out the most to me is what happened deep within the Bell tunnels. You finally find a Bell station, hoping to see Ira, a buddy you've loved and relied on for nearly the entire game. But when you call for her like you always do, Ira! Something's not quite right. A monstrous centipede emerges and clearly does not like the idea of you riding it, and you go down the Bell tunnels to see what's going on. Eventually, this centipede makes his formal appearance, and you see his name appear in the corner of the screen, Bell Eater. I can't properly describe the feeling of my heart shattering when I saw that name. Does this creature eat bell beasts? Did it kill Ira? Is she gone forever? So many questions race through your head, but you don't have time to think about that because you've entered this monster's territory, and it wants you dead. But that doesn't matter, because you want it dead just as much. This fucker killed your companion, and it won't live to see tomorrow. I may be in the minority here, but I really enjoyed this battle. Like Fourth Chorus, its structure and moveset is more akin to a boss from Metroid or Donkey Kong. Its entire body is immune to damage except for the head and anus, and these two weak points will only be vulnerable during certain attacks. It will always fire these red explosive balls from its anus that can be parried, while the head will either slash its razor legs or spew Hawaiian Punch all over the place. What makes this work is that there are always small but prominent openings to hit the weak points, and if you really master this fight, you can even alternate between smacking the head and bottom while they're both out. The first phase keeps you just cramped enough to have to learn the attacks head on, while the second phase introduces the slither attacks and has bells that drop from the ceiling to crush you. Once the Bell Eater has had enough of your persistence, he lets out a roar and all hope seems lost. I'm not ashamed to admit it, I screamed like a goddamn girl when Ira came crashing in to save the day, and I screamed even louder when her babies popped up. It was literally the scene from Shrek 2 where Dragon returns to Donkey, but in the best way possible. This is just an awesome opener to Act 3. You can constantly engage with the head and butt. The bells and butt balls add a lot of pressure yet can be parried with your weapon, and the buildup of this guy is one of the best in either Hollow Knight game. It also just says a lot about Ira as a character, because the Bell Eater is most definitely the predator of the Bell Beast, but Ira stood up to it for the sake of our safety. It's the horse standing up to the bear, all because it was attacking her rider. Just phenomenal storytelling altogether. Bell Eater is just an underrated gem of a monster, with a great design and fight that is made amazing by its incredible build-up and awesome narrative payoff.
Counter! 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 Counter!
Silksong never fails to impress me with how interconnected the world is, and the lack of linear progression makes every person's experience different from the last. For example, there are two main ways you can go into the Citadel in Act 1. The main entrance you access through the blasted steps, and the back entrance you can access through a long string of areas. From a misty region filled with ghost ladies that hug you like an aunt at a family reunion.
Get out of my way! It's so. Oh no! Yes! No! Ah!
To my favorite place of all time, Biowater. After all this, you enter the exhaust organ, where pillars of hot steam expel from the pipes you ascend, with the distant sound of an organ being played. It's at this point you realize that the exhaust organ is responsible for all of the mist in the previous region. Not only that, but the center of this location is an actual organ, an instrument being played by none other than Lace's long-forgotten sister, Phantom. Yeah, the symbolism isn't exactly subtle here. The dramatic organ, white mask, mysterious music player, you don't need me to tell you it's inspired by Phantom of the Opera. But that's how you know it's good, because the presentation of this boss is truly top-notch. She literally appears out of thin smoke, having an insane amount of presence that sells her as a finale to Act 1. And if that didn't sell you the grandeur, then the incredible music absolutely will. With the titular organ bringing so much life to this OST, it's entirely unique from the rest of the soundtrack. Her design is awesome as well. There's so much going on with the wild black hair, her gold long-pin spear akin to Lace's sword, her tattered gray clothes, and the iconic white mask that she has to constantly hold up with her hand. All of these details make for one of the most simple but effective designs in this game, so much so that I wish we saw more of her as a character than this one encounter. What makes her a solid battle is the constant flow and rhythm. There's rarely any downtime, as Phantom is always either gliding with her spear throws, evading your attacks, or repositioning to strike you down. The parry mechanic is also fun with how she zips across the screen at Mach speed, and I especially love when she uses the steam in the second phase, dropping down and keeping you on the move constantly. What makes this boss somewhat underwhelming to me is how easy it is to deal with her, as basically every attack except for the steam can be dealt with by jumping once. As mentioned, simplicity doesn't make a boss bad, but when you're doing the same strategy to deal with the boss the entire time, it gets old pretty fast. Phantom really should be more punishing for how much of a feat it is to reach her. Last Judge runs circles around her in terms of being a skill check to test all that you've learned so far. That is too bad, because otherwise, I love most of the other aspects about Phantom. In the second phase, she'll pop in and out of the steam to catch you by surprise, but with how easy it is to avoid her attacks, it takes away a lot of the intensity I would hope for. You could say that I'm being too harsh on an Act 1 boss, but as mentioned, I think there are some bosses in Act 1 that capture a similar gravitas, but outmatch her in both complexity and engagement. Even after saying all that, the end of this fight more than makes up for it, when Hornet finally starts giving a flying fuck. No words, no notes, just a phenomenal way to end this boss. Phantom truly has a lot going for it. I just personally found the battle to be somewhat unimpressive. Do keep in mind that I fought Last Judge first and didn't reach Phantom until Act 2, so I am curious if my opinion will change when I prioritize fighting her on a second playthrough.
Sentinels!
The Citadel is such an interesting locale, this colossal fortress built under the Grandmother Silk's control. You can feel both the glory this kingdom once had, and the iron grip that was held on all the lower class and anyone who opposed her rule. But to me, one of the biggest indicators of its cruelty is the automatons. Despite being built as soulless weapons to serve the Citadel's dominion, these constructs have more emotion and soul than the supposed living beings that made them. And the second Sentinel is one NPC that truly represents this. It's basically a build-a-boss. You find and assemble an item called a cogwork heart, which you can insert into this lifeless vessel to bring it back online. Second Sentinel served to help pilgrims travel the Citadel safely and eliminate any living thing that might oppose its creators. It even talks with you and helps fight some enemies throughout the locale. And more pilgrims arrive at Songclave, praising the Sentinel for escorting and protecting them. However, the Sentinel eventually perceives you as the true threat and vows to slay you. I like how the Sentinel choosing to fight you works equally well in Act 2 as well as Act 3. In Act 3, it realizes that you are responsible for the Void's infection across its home, and in Act 2, it sees you as a vessel of silk and therefore a threat to the pilgrims. The battle is basically a mix of the lace fights and pinstress, with the Big X attack, a counter that deals double damage, anti-aerials to cut you down, and combo extensions you can parry. I don't really have a lot to say about it because it's not necessarily unique, it just combines the abilities of other good bosses into a single package. One that I think feels cohesive and fun. You could say that it's emblematic of its nature. Sentinel is an automaton built to mimic the fighting styles of other warriors, but cannot create anything unique for itself. What I find most interesting is what happens after you defeat it. Sentinel accepts that it failed its task and deserves death as a result, waiting for Hornet to kill it, as all of its fellow automatons have. But Hornet doesn't, simply asking that they part as friends. And I love that Sentinel stutters in repeating what Hornet says, almost as if taken aback by Hornet's sympathy and kindness for a mere construct. It really shows the humanity behind Sentinel, and while not the best boss to execute this concept, it is still done incredibly well here. I don't really have any issues with Second Sentinel or any unfair attacks worth mentioning. I just think there are far better duels or bosses that use the same foundation as it. Second Sentinel is still a fantastic time though, just a bit too rusty for my liking.
Welcome to the Krusty Towers, where our motto is fuck you!
Oh, that's great.
Anyone familiar with me knows that I love Coral Reef levels. Whether it be the Coral Highlands in Monster Hunter, the Luma Pools in Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or the entirety of Subnautica, these regions always become favorites of mine no matter what game they're in.
Like a dolphin, I dive out of the sea.
And the Coral Tower is no exception. You spend the last hour traveling through this windswept wasteland, with only a few bosses indicating that there was once plenty of biodiversity to see here. The only other sign of life is this tall tower, where you find a room filled with a terracotta army of soldiers, and a king long lost to time. But using the Needlein reveals something truly spectacular. Seeing that this locale was once a glorious and beautiful coral reefland is jaw-dropping. In fact, my biggest complaint is that there wasn't a bigger area that we could explore, especially given what the trailer showed. Instead, what we get is a boss gauntlet akin to the Colosseum of Fools in the original Hollow Knight. I will say, I find the Coral Tower to be a lot more fun, mainly because all of the enemies feel designed to be fought in this kind of gauntlet. It also helps that ascending the Krusty Tower Gauntlet leads to a pretty awesome foe at the end. Crust King Kong ruled as the monarch of Karak, leading the kingdom with an iron fist and level of discipline that hardened his people into an unbreakable army. When you find him at the top of Krusty Towers, you can feel his power and authority, with the strength to surpass his people and the aura to command them. He fights by summoning these pillars of coral crust that will sprout from the environment. They cover a wide amount of range but are easy to see coming, which gives you prominent openings to punish Khan. This battle may have two distinct phases, but it more so simply ramps up in speed and tempo as it progresses, with Khan's crust attacks turning into combos and attack strings that keep you on your toes. The only new attacks are these stalactites that drop down from above, and the spikes that sprout out after he lets out a yell. I have made complaints about some bosses being too repetitive or lacking enough moves to be interesting, but I think the difference between those guys and something like Khan is the engagement. With some of the weakest bosses, they end up being so simple and mundane that I don't feel engaged, and more importantly, I'm not having fun. Meanwhile, Khan has a simple moveset, but the difference is that the fight is constantly engaging and so damn fun. The accelerated pace of the fight gives you less and less openings to punish. The claw line or pogoing off the crust spears makes this incredibly satisfying, and there's always something happening on screen to keep you moving. The arena and build-up are impeccable, his design is awesome and evokes the image of a king, the music is top-notch, it's just an all-around badass boss fight. I also don't mind this guy being around medium difficulty because of the insane gauntlet before him. I actually like the gauntlet quite a bit. Sure, it takes a long time to get to the top, but if you reach the final floor, you unlock a shortcut that reduces the run back from 10 minutes to 2. Otherwise, I do wish he was more creative with his moveset, because the crust is all we see in terms of his abilities. They could have given him a water beam or some melee attacks up close that you can parry. Just a little bit more spice could easily put this boss higher on the list. Crust King Kong is definitely one of the most underrated bosses in my opinion. I just love so many things about him, and while not being the most complex, makes up for it by how damn fun it is to take this king down.
I'm not reaching for the stars, I just want everyone to love me. And then I want to kill all of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for a very special guest. The tycoon of theatrics, the tyrant of thespians, the big wig of Broadway. I present to you... This man is the biggest diva in all of Fairloom, and I love him so much for that. Trobio is a fan favorite for a damn good reason, because he is just oozing with personality and character. His overdramatic entrance, screaming his own name in triumph, all the fireworks and pyrokinetics on his stage, the man knows how to sell a show, what can I say? Fairloom is such a gloomy and depressing kingdom, with very few areas you can call vibrant or colorful. So when Trobio comes in, blasting fireworks and sparkly bombs, it creates a flurry of color and chaos that feels alien in this kind of world. No matter what you think of Trobio as a fight, he undeniably deserves credit for how unique he is in vibes and atmosphere. His lore just makes this even funnier, because Trobio is convinced that the only thing that can save Fairloom is a performance dazzling enough to magically cure the world. It's so hysterical that I can't help but adore the man for his enthusiasm. Then on to the fight. Trobio has a variety of sparkalicious attacks to I hated saying that word so much. Variety of different attacks to work with. He can throw these bomb balls that pop out in different directions, but you can smack them to stave away the pressure. He can hide in the trapdoor, setting off fireworks to catch you by surprise, and can float around with his butterfly wings, being able to unleash a tornado with after effects that demand precise positioning. This is an Act 2 boss that requires you dash and dive to get attacks in, as well as having to manage multiple AoEs at once. He has just the right amount of speed and explosions to demand your full attention, and if you thought it couldn't get any better, finally defeating Trobio leads him to give the most overdramatic death I've ever seen, with enough fireworks to light up the darkest pits of Deepnest. It's so over the top and ludicrous, I love it so much. And he doesn't even die, he just plays dead and gives you the mirror, which you can see if you go back into the arena afterwards. Trobio just has a lot of qualities that make for a fantastic foe, but I do think the fight suffers from being a bit simple. It's still enjoyable, but I can't help but feeling more could have been done. With this kind of character, I guess I was expecting a little bit more presentation! Now we're talking. Tormented Trobio is a rematch against your favorite thespian, who has gone through an emo phase since your last encounter. Whether that's from him losing to you in battle, the collapse of Fairloom in Act 3, getting hooked onto 3 Days Grace, it's certainly up for debate. Trobio assumes that more glitter and sparkles are needed to save the world, and challenges Hornet to a duel that in his mind will cure everyone, and he certainly gives it his all, now with a new purple color scheme that looks so much better. This battle just doubles down on everything. The fireworks fireworks are bigger and more frequent, the bombs pop out in 4 directions now, the tornadoes have explosive glitter, and he brought sparkles. Lots and lots of sparkles. There's not much else to say because the fight doesn't really add anything new that the first Trobio didn't already do. It just takes it all to the next level. You're likely confused as to why he's nearly on par with the original. Well, this version has a few problems that don't exist on the first Trobio, which balances the two out into the same 9 out of 10 score. Because of how many fireworks go off, it can often turn into a mess of visual clutter that prevents you from seeing his next attack, and sometimes they corner you to the point where you have nowhere to go. He also has this insta-firework AoE that, along with all the extra explosions, really takes away a lot of the openings that made the OG Trobio such a thrilling dance. So while I do think Tormented Trobio upgrades many things about the original, its own unique problems prevent me from saying this is as good of an upgrade as something like Sisters of Battle or Nightmare King Grim. You still gotta give the guy credit. Trobio always did have style.
Caucasity of this bitch.
We return to our good old friend Lace, this time for her second encounter. Since last time I talked about her design and music, I want to focus this section on the lore and what makes her a compelling character to me. Lace was born of Silk by the grandmother as a replacement, someone to maintain control of the Citadel in the absence of a true ruler. She was molded to be childlike, frail, and obedient, which seemed to be grandmother Silk's method of having a child that wouldn't defy her the way the Weavers did. Both she and Phantom were born from Silk, and more so used as tools for the grandmother to use so she could maintain control. However, while Phantom was isolated and left to die alone, Lace grew to resent her mother for molding her as this weak child, with her arrogance driving that resentment even more. I didn't go into Phantom's lore too much in her section, but her backstory is pretty tragic, and you can see why Lace would resent her mother so much. Imagine having to watch your sister be isolated from the world, having to slowly deteriorate and work laboriously because that's what your mother made you for. It's messed up, especially when the only one to truly blame for both of their suffering is their mother. Despite being a rival in this game, Lace is more so a mirror of Hornets. They are both children born of Silk by gods who once ruled their domain, and now have to suffer the sins of the father, or rather their mothers. All of that detail is important to consider when finally getting to face her again. You spend the entire Act 2 collecting these melodies, all for the sake of ascending the cradle and facing Grandmother Silk. But resting atop a bed of flowers is Lace, who's here for a rematch and the only thing standing in your way against the Pale Monarch. This is exactly how you should upgrade an early game boss, giving it new moves, a way faster tempo, and new mechanics that make it stand out from the original version. She now has a second variation of her parry, which punishes you for staying in the air. She has AoEs that require you to stay close to her, some new combo extensions that cut you down, and the ability to punish you no matter how high you jump. Otherwise, there really isn't much else to say. A lot of my comments and praises about the first Lace encounter apply here, but a greatly improved fight, some added gimmicks, and an absolutely gorgeous arena help carry her into the Mastapiece tier. But once again, I want to put a pin on everything I want to discuss, because I'll have quite a lot to say about her sometime soon.
Flaming death!
Silksong is a difficult game. Controversial statement, I know. The kind that pushes beginners and veterans alike to the absolute limit, giving them scars that they will never recover from.
I can't do it anymore because my thumb is killing me from the platforming. Look, you guys, you see it? Look at my thumb. This is the problem with the game. So you want me to do this challenge, but look what you've done to my thumb playing your game.
He's bleeding to death. You got a bigger cut on the end of your fucking dick.
But with these types of games, there's always that first infamous wall that players always talk about in fear. A foe that tears you limb from limb, taking attempt after attempt, and won't keel until you are more than ready to tackle the rest of the journey. And if you want to talk about Silksong's big wall, it is undeniably The Last Judge. If fourth chorus was Cuphead vibes, then this boss is undeniably Dark Souls vibes. Like, come on, a warrior clad in heavy armor uses a giant bell to attack, bombastic music with intense choirs, serves as a guardian to test if warriors are worthy to enter the kingdom. Speaking of which, the music is absolutely killer. It is one of my favorite tracks in the entire game. It's so damn good. The primary goal of Act 1 is to get to the Citadel, and unless you use a shortcut, she's the last foe that blocks your way to that fortress, quite literally dropping in once you're at her doormat. She even kills some of your buddies trying to get in. It's such a heartbreaking moment. They were such memorable characters. What were their names again? And why bother? Anyways, this girl's a banger. I love that all of her attacks convey the weight of her armor, the clanks of bronze against each other, her grunts at performing such nimble movements, and just how much you feel the impact of each and every one of her strikes. She doesn't mess around either. Using a bell on a whip grants her an insane amount of range, being able to clobber you up close and from afar. It actually feels like a breeze at first, with the attacks being very simple and routine, but once she gets the bell blazing, things are a lot more intense, with fire AoEs and flame after effects that demand precise positioning from the player. I honestly didn't find her that hard, being really easy to learn and manage after a few attempts, but that's kind of the point. It's a fight that feels daunting and intense at first, but thrives in its simplicity and becomes incredibly satisfying to master. This battle does exactly what a skill check boss should do, demanding that you've mastered everything you've learned on this journey so far. It doesn't have any aspects that blow me away or leave me speechless, which is why she's not in the peak tier, but she's rock solid all around, and an incredibly awesome foe to take down. There are some small nitpicks I could list, like the rings of fire she summons having some iffy hitboxes, and the lack of lore aside from being the guardian meant to prove warriors worthy of the Citadel. The only thing I could legitimately criticize her for is the awful runback. But once again, I'm not counting runbacks, and the Blasted Steps is just a god-awful area all around. Be careful once you deliver the killing attack, because some excess methane gas will indicate that she's rigged to below. Just backing up will ensure your safety, but it can easily kill off new players. As an experienced player myself who has mastered Metroidvanias, I saw this attack coming from a mile away, so I unfortunately can't show what happens when you get blown up. There isn't any footage I can show of me getting blown up, dying, and yelling so loud my roommate came to check up on me because I am that good at this game. Stop asking so many questions. Ultimately, I love The Last Judge, and she more than fits the role of a big skill check, both in the well-designed fight and the overall gravitas of it all.
When he was crushed by a giant bell.
Widow was the first boss that truly blew me away, and let me know that this game was gonna be just as much of a masterpiece as its predecessor. As mentioned earlier, Grandmother Silk had created the weavers of this world. However, one of said weavers disapproved of this, and didn't believe in the supposed love her supposed mother had. This weaver, known as the First Sinner, formed a rebellion and trapped her mother. But eventually, the Pale Monarch broke free, and used her control to hunt down and imprison all of the remaining weavers. Widow was one of the very few survivors, having her silk bound with pins and her mask torn from her face. In doing so, this weaver lost her identity, and became known as Widow, who now plays songs on her silk to haunt the people of Bellheart, all in hopes of appeasing her mother after being punished and stripped of her very essence. She's the first time you stand off against a weaver, and they let you know it. This fight is incredible for so many different reasons. Everything you fought up to this point has maybe a third of the moves that this girl has. She's relentless but very manageable once you understand her telegraphs. You also have to be aware and smart with where you heal so she won't crush you under a bell. Speaking of, I love the use of her bells. Expanding on the bell beast from earlier, Widow will string up bells to crush you instead of needles. This not only makes sense because of the lore, but also makes her dangerous with how the bells will ricochet depending on the direction she pulls them. This battle is just as great of a skill check as Last Judge, testing your positioning with the bells bouncing, your mobility with the waves of bells she'll drop or the eruptions from the ground, or your ability to heal under stressful situations. It's all just combined together masterfully with this one single opponent. But just when you thought you could handle this boss, Phase 2 begins, and the fight truly becomes insane. Widow doesn't have any new moves, but she now summons entire rows of bells to crush you, and her attacks come out so fast that sometimes you have to manage both the bells and Widow herself. It makes this fight exhilarating in the best way possible, and it's all fair in a way that you feel like you're so close to beating her every single time. Widow is just a prime example of how to do an early game boss, mainly because she has both the energy and complexity found in some of the best bosses in Act 2 and 3. I would like to say that Widow is the best Weaver boss that Silksong has to offer, if it weren't for a certain other sinner.
and did it my way.
Team Cherry has become a studio I have nothing but the utmost appreciation for, and that's not just because they charged this masterpiece for only $20. Their surprisingly small team have an endless amount of passion towards the games they make, with Seth being what truly cemented my respect for them as a studio. Seth does not seem like a boss that should be all that extraordinary. He's a one-on-one duel against a warrior wielding a sword, and is only there to guard the supposed real boss with Nihilith. Yet somehow, not only does Seth run circles around Nihilith as a boss, but also stands tall as one of the best in the entire roster. Seth sits on a rock and blocks the only way to Nihilith's temple, claiming to be its protector, and Hornet will only be able to pass if she beats him in combat. The fact that the game gives you one last chance to retreat lets you know that you're getting yourself into quite a pickle with challenging this foe. Seth wields a sword and shield, and both are equally dangerous to deal with. This shield is far from superficial, as he can block your attacks and be totally invulnerable to damage. Not only this, but Seth is insanely punishing, never giving you a second to breathe and always prepping some kind of attack to slice you into sushi. Despite this, there is always a safe zone for each and every one of his moves, and once you learn how to counter them all, the feeling is simply intoxicating. Whether it be standing next to where the spinning shield lands, or always knowing the last shield slam will be followed up by a thrust attack, there's something so fluid about this fight that simply outshines many of the duels mentioned earlier. That's not even going into the second phase, where every attack now has some kind of combo extension, but the safe zones still remain, so you never feel like you're waiting for Seth to let you hit him. It's an all-around incredible duel that never fails to get the blood pumping. If this was all Seth had to offer, this would already be an amazing boss, but there's so much more to him than that. Seth also has a heartbreaking backstory that goes beyond just video game lore. Seth Goldman was a boy who absolutely adored Hollow Knight, and always dreamed of the chance to play Silksong, even creating his own titular boss. Eventually, Seth turned out to have cancer, a tragic fate that no kid deserves to suffer. But Team Cherry met with Seth, not only letting him play the game he always dreamed of, but also offering to make that boss a reality of his, a piece of him that would always remain with the game he loved so much, even after he passed away. The lore in game also extends beyond being a simple guardian. Beating him in battle and taking Nihilith's heart isn't the end of Seth's story, as your actions broke whatever bound him into guarding that temple, and he finds purpose outside of that role. Later on, you can see that he finally found his place at the Flea Festival, playing the Flea games and achieving some insane high scores for you to conquer. I like to think that part of Seth Goldman is still in this character, getting joy from the Flea escapades, and enjoying the game he loved so much. A phenomenal boss, and a truly beautiful tribute to an amazing kid. Rest in peace, Seth Goldman. You will be remembered in all of our hearts.
I swear I'm sweating like a sinner in church.
Our next boss is the First Sinner. No, that's not it. I mean the Lost Sinner. Wait, no, that's not it. Aldia, Scholar of the First Sin. Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. Yep, that's the one. Anyways, this boss is flat out phenomenal, and I don't think you'll find many people who disagree with that statement. Like Widow, Sinner was another Weaver who rebelled against Grandmother Silk. In fact, she was the ringleader of that rebellion I talked about, and deemed the first sinner for her apostasy. Because of this, she was chained up and sealed behind locked door after locked door after locked door, never to be seen again. You find yourself deep within the confines of the slab, and realize that the prison you've traversed so far is simply superficial compared to what they're truly keeping locked up. But when you break the bonds and set her free, the First Sinner doesn't have much gratitude to offer. She seems like an incredibly daunting foe at first, some might say unfair. She constantly teleports away from you and dodges your attacks with an unrivaled amount of grace and poise. It appears near impossible to even get a single hit in, as she delivers attacks faster than any foe you've faced thus far, and she even has the nerve to heal herself from a distance. Instead of the bells that Widow pulled with her strings, Sinner utilizes needles that are launched in rows to align with her attacks. From above, diagonally, the left, right, these needles can be fired in any direction to cut you down. However, unlike Grandmother Silk, Sinner has a variety of physical attacks that align with her needles, forcing you to handle both on the fly. All of this sounds impossible to manage, but there's one thing that turns a possibly unfair fight into one of the most satisfying in the entire game: The claw line. This skill turns this once game of cat and mouse into a graceful and intense dance, one that demands your full attention. The claw line lets you get up close when she backs off. It allows you to interrupt her heals. It lets you position yourself properly to avoid the needles and the sinner herself. It's also masterfully designed, in a way that takes an ability that I myself just use for platforming and requires your mastery of it in both evasion and combat. Her attacks and movement not only encourage aggression, but demand it in order to win, and I adore that so much. I love that she takes a lot of the qualities and attacks of Widow, an already amazing boss, and amplifies them up to match your new abilities in Act 2, which lore-wise connects the two as Weavers as well. Speaking of Widow, Sinner also has a Phase 2, where her speed is driven up the wazoo, and she gains a new ability to unleash these runes that demand quick and clever positioning. Now, where have I seen that one before? This is an all-around spectacular boss. From the absolute thrill of a fight, to the gorgeous design and graceful music, it truly deserves the praise it has gotten from most fans. But with First Sinner done, we finally reached the big 3 in my eyes. Let's do it.
Whoa! Is that blackface, dude?
It's all been building to this. Traveling across Fairloom, reaching the top of the Citadel, taking down Grandmother Silk, defeating the Old Ones, confronting Hornet's past. This entire journey has led you to face the darkness head on. You return to the Abyss with the Everbloom, and find an old frenemy awaiting outside of the Black Goop, Lace. She laments her mother and kingdom, going full-on nihilistic as she awaits the void to consume her world, as it has consumed her. After all, why would she bother fighting against the void? She was made to be a tool and nothing more, thrown to decay once lived its use by her mother. When you're born to be a soulless vessel of will, designed to accomplish the tasks of your maker and nothing else, you don't deserve to be given purpose or identity. No, that's not true at all. It's the deeds that make the man, not where they come from or what the world tells them to be. That's what Silksong is all about. The dancers and their love for each other, the Second Sentinel and his humanity, Ira and her compassion for her rider, Seth finding his purpose outside of a guardian, and most of all, Hornet and her will to change this world. All of these characters were made or born to serve a purpose, to be used as tools with no will or identity for themselves, and we see how Hornet changes them all for the better. Hornet frees Seth from his binds and gives him a place to call home. She spares Sentinel's life and calls him a friend. She gives Ira a name and purpose in a dying world. She frees the Eternal Dancers and lets them rest in peace together. She ultimately gives these characters a purpose beyond what they were programmed to do. Hornet herself was nothing more than a bargain to her father, the Pale King, who only had a kid with her mother Hera as means to save his dying world. She was born to provide an heir to a world ruined by her father, but she doesn't let that define her choices, or the changes she can make to Fairloom. Ultimately, these Hollow Knight games revolve around the sins of the father, through Lace, Hornet, and the protagonist of the original game, the Knight. All 3 of these characters are parallels of each other, children of different gods that are not born out of love, but as tools to sustain their kingdoms and world. Despite their conception and purpose, all 3 parents had some level of compassion for their children. The Pale King cared for his Hollow Knight, which led to his suffering. Hera wanted her child to live her own life and succeed where she could not. And Grandmother Silk did grow some empathy for Lace, which we'll get into later. All 3 parents left their kids to a dying world, and they all had to atone the sins of the father, choosing what to do with their lives and who they were going to be outside of what their parents made them for. Hornet has come to terms with this after facing her past, but Lace has yet to learn this lesson, and Hornet dives into the abyss, ready to face her rival and save her from the dark. Protected by the Everbloom, she descends until reaching a cocoon of silk deep within the trenches of the abyss, and sees that Grandmother Silk built this to protect Lace. After seeing how selfish and tyrannical she has been throughout the story, having Grandmother finally prioritize her daughter over her own well-being is quite poetic. But Lace erupts from the darkness to face you, having been given a more fitting name. Now we can talk about the battle, because this is truly a spectacular duel. Lost Lace is easily the hardest boss in the entire game, and I don't think there's anyone who comes close. In fact, the entirety of Lace's second encounter is not even as hard as the first phase, out of 4. There's a lot to talk about mechanically, so let's briefly go over the aesthetics. pristine. You're in a giant cocoon in the center of the abyss, with black tendrils dripping from the ceiling, creating a pool of tar with the grandmother's body crucified and screaming in anguish. It's absolutely top-tier arena design, and the music is equally fantastic, giving the finality and grandeur you'd expect from a final boss. As for the fight, everything good about her first 2 encounters transferred over, but now has so many new attacks and mechanics that she barely resembles the previous 2. She can launch void tendrils from her arms to strike you from afar, has trails of tendrils that follow up her thrusts, the ability to dip into the abyssal floor and pop out to catch you off guard, and way more combos. There is practically no downtime, with her constantly prepping a new attack or repositioning to get you with another extension. Then the second phase kicks in and introduces the void attacks that can be found in most Act 3 enemies, like the razor blobs and homing missiles. What makes this far more enjoyable than Lost Garmon is that all of these attacks are used to align with her physical attacks, in a way that gives her fight more complexity rather than feeling unfair. And the massive arena plays a huge part in using this to your advantage. This leads into Phase 3, where Grandmother Silk loses her grip on the cocoon, and you have to dodge these massive void waves that start to envelop the arena. Lastly, Phase 4 introduces a flurry attack with danger zones you need to avoid, bringing it all back to that original Lace encounter, from that simple weaver standing against a cocky Silkhead, now given so much context behind their origins and the world around them. Otherwise, the fight stays the same, but the intensity and speed is turned from a 9 to 11 to a 13 to a 15, pushing to the absolute limit while never feeling arduous. That is until the final blow is dealt and Lace has been defeated by Hornet for the last time. The cocoon now becomes drowned by the dark as Lace rises from the black pools below, finally free from the abyssal control. Hornet picks her up and pleads with Grandmother Silk to give her strength, enough strength to soar out of the abyss and give her daughter a second chance at life. It's at this moment when Mother finally realizes that despite the pain and turmoil she inflicted on her daughter, she still has a chance to make things right, and sacrifices her life for the sake of Lace. They ascend the abyss, but something goes wrong. The Everbloom protecting her has decayed, and the abyss takes its chance to strike. Something saves her. The Hollow Knight, from the original game, having become one with the Void, along with his brethren. It may be nostalgia or Deus Ex Machina, but I don't care. It was so beautiful to see our old friend, having repaid the favor of Hornet saving his life in the original game. And with that, the knight brings Hornet and Lace up from the abyss, Fairloom is saved, and the world can finally remain at peace. This boss is such an incredible finale to Silksong, from the impeccable narrative, to the jaw-dropping spectacle, to possibly the most mechanical complexity of any foe in this game. Lost Lace has so much going for it. It all just builds into this frantic and thrilling waltz, one I didn't mind spending 42 attempts failing to beat. Yet the mechanics are still learnable, and given how difficult this battle is, insanely gratifying to master. It's for that reason I was tempted to put her in the top spot. But there are a few problems in her fight that prevent me from calling her the best boss. Number 1, the teleporting. I understand why it's here to prevent her from getting cornered, but sometimes she'll just pop up in your face and deal that all too familiar contact damage. Number 2, the void walls. They are here to display the cocoon breaking open, but there's such a long gap between the walls and getting the fighter again that it takes away from the otherwise immaculate pacing. And number 3, sometimes the black tendril walls and explosions can make it tough to see where Lace is, which makes anticipating her attacks frustrating at times. Despite those issues, the highs of Lost Lace are more than enough to push her into the peak tier, and I definitely understand why many consider her the best boss. Lost Lace is still an incredible tour de force. Thematically, aesthetically, mechanically, musically, she is truly a masterpiece in every way. Emotional and environmental storytelling are such powerful tools in the world of boss design, and when you combine them together, it has the potential to make your boss truly spectacular. And if you want to discuss bosses that are able to evoke the deepest emotions without uttering a single word, you look to the Clockwork Dancers. This duo is such a magnificent piece of art that I don't even know where to start. Act 2 has been all about traversing the Citadel, but at the center of it all is a massive clock, its mechanics awakening 2 automatons to stand in your way. As mentioned with the Clover Dancers, one of the Green Princes gave his life to protect his home, leading to the creation of these automatons as soulless guardians to defend the Citadel. However, they aren't as soulless as you think. They synchronize perfectly with their attacks, even sharing a moment after joining in arms, longingly looking at each other's eyes. The Green Prince is still in there, his love for his partner deep within the copper confines of these creations. The concept of this boss is incredible, a mechanical duo inspired by automatons that move on clocks, and having said duo move together in sync with the tempo of their music. It's so imaginative that I cannot applaud Team Cherry enough. Even the music connects this motif, with the use of a music box for the main melody and mechanical clicks and clacks as percussion, as well as a style akin to classical Roman ballet to tie it all together. The tempo of the dancers starts out slow, with the lines in their eyes indicating where they'll migrate to, and moving in sync at 100 beats per minute with a simple 4x4 signature. The music is always in sync with the fight, matching the beat to the dancer's attacks so you always know when to expect it. In fact, when you pause during any boss fight in this game, the music will play, just quiet and more muffled. When you pause the dancers, the music stops. Everything is silent. This fight is all about the cohesion between the music and how the two move. Once you've gotten a solid grasp on the first phase, that's when things start to escalate. The dancers retreat to their chambers and are wound up, before being sprung back out at a much faster pace, this time moving at a quicker 160 beats per minute. Phase 2 is where you start to truly be tested on positioning. You finally start to click with the music, learning to time your tempo with their attacks, taking advantage after every downbeat in this song. It's beautiful and satisfying in a way that words can't properly describe. Then the dancers get wound up again. Phase 3 starts, and everything gets thrown off balance. The dancers maintain the same tempo, but one of the dancers is now delayed from the other by a beat, leading them to attack sequentially rather than simultaneously. This makes the battle a lot more difficult to juggle, but the feeling is once again unreal, as you learn to adapt to the two dancers, and use the offbeat to your advantage. The music also illustrates this conflict between the boss and Hornet. The track has so far committed to this solely mechanical instrumentation, but Hornet's motif enters as horns join the composition in Phase 3, clashing in a beautiful duel to show that you have stood tall and proven yourself worthy. The thrill never ends, the blood never stops pumping, your positioning and reaction time are pushed to the limit, and it all culminates to... the death of a dancer, and it all falls silent. The other dancer returns to its chamber, being wound up again to continue its task. Without the second dancer, the fight feels broken, wrong, incomplete. You can see in my gameplay how much this affected me, making me feel just as out of my element as the dancer himself. All of the climactic percussion and triumphant horns have disappeared, leaving only a broken music box left, sounding both creepy and depressing. The phase is incredibly easy, but that's the point. It conveys how lost the dancer is without his lover, especially when he moves to the center to twirl with his partner, only to see that his partner is gone, and simply lowers in sorrow. It shouldn't be possible to convey this much emotion with robotic bugs, but Team Cherry succeeded with this duo. No matter who you are, you felt the agony of having lost someone, whether it be a family member, friend, or significant other, that feeling of emptiness that makes your entire existence feel broken. It truly captures so much emotion and tragedy, a tragedy to live without someone who gave you more meaning than words could possibly describe, a tragedy to bear your pain and go through the motions that life puts you through, a tragedy to find the will to live and overcome a darkness that you feel will never leave your heart. Clockwork Dancers never fails to take my breath away. There's so much to dissect about this boss that I can make an entire multi-segmented video breaking it down, but they absolutely deserve being in the peak tier, no doubt about it. It's a beautiful experience and possibly the biggest highlight in Silksong's roster. How could I not adore it? You knew this was coming. You knew this was coming. In my mind, only a handful of Silksong's bosses even remotely stood a chance against Scar Singer Carmelita. Easily the best and most satisfying fight in the entire game, and the only one I can confidently say is mechanically perfect. First of all, the setting and lead up are incredible. The Scar is a massive kingdom of ant warriors, and the first ancient civilization you get exposed to. The ants are fiercer than any foes you face at that point in the game. There's a reason Team Cherry made this section such a notorious wall for players. When you finally meet the queen of this land, she's a frail old woman so far past her prime that she couldn't even lift a finger to oppose you. But playing the needle in reveals the true power she was capable of all those years ago. The arena has so much atmosphere, this massive coliseum surrounded by Scar warriors of all shapes and sizes, with Carmelita performing a dance like no other. Her OST is one of the best in the entire game, only beaten out by Clockwork dancers in my opinion. The heavenly vocals, strings, and horns bring out an ungodly amount of grace and power to this track. But what makes it so good is that she's the one who sings the vocals. You hear it before challenging her, and when you deal a knockdown, she stops singing and only the instrumentation plays. Until getting back up and the vocals continue. A masterpiece of musical storytelling. Then we get to my favorite part of Carmelita and primarily why she's number one, the battle itself. This fight doesn't stop. There are no moments where the boss retreats or gives you time to heal and recover. She just fights and she fights and she fights and she fights and she fights, and every attack is telegraphed with incredibly satisfying patterns to learn. Every move extends into the next in a graceful, natural fluidity that doesn't feel like a combo extension, but like an endless flowing river that conveys both beauty and brutality. When you are fighting Carmelita, there is never a 3-second window where you can attack. You can constantly be aggressive and up in her face, especially since you can parry both her melee strikes and the thrown sickles. You can pogo on her strikes that she erupts and use the claw line to close the distance. This battle constantly rewards mobility in the most exhilarating of ways. Like for Sinner, your aggression is basically a requirement given that Carmelita will always be relentless. She fights with 2 curvesicles, a tool you can craft and use, and she uses them for both rapid sweeping combos and shurikens with a scary amount of accuracy. Whenever you want to heal or attack, you have to be as careful as possible because she will demolish you if you mistime anything. Her spinning dash into her spikes prevent aerial healing, and her sickles prevent grounded healing, and all of it demands a new level of skill and precision from the player. Her design is one of the biggest positives I can give, and you learn a lot about her as a character from the brief screen time you get. Silksong is filled with a lot of female characters and bosses, but most of them aren't traditionally feminine. Whether it be masking their femininity with armor or rags, brandishing massive swords and weapons, or not being humanoid in shape, most female characters don't condone to these conventions. I think this is a brilliant design choice, as it makes Hornet and the rulers of Fairloom stick out all the more with their more distinct feminine designs. The same goes for one other person, Carmelita. With a gorgeous crimson dress and antenna that resembles red flowing hair, she fully embraces her femininity as part of her identity, even while fighting you with vicious amounts of aggression. These two sides of her are not mutually exclusive. To her, it is only natural that a graceful queen has the strength to outmatch any warrior in her clan. She clearly enjoys the role, her heavenly singing and war cries, the way she talks about her people with pride. It all makes for such an interesting character to break down. I think it's telling that her kingdom is the only one in Fairloom to have not been overrun and ruined by the Citadel. Sure, their territory was diminished after Carmelita grew too old to fight, but their civilization is still alive and as ferocious as ever. I also find it poetic that the only kingdom to survive wasn't ruled by ruthless discipline or greedy ambition, but was instead ruled by compassion and community. It makes Carmelita a far more endearing character than most of the other monarchs in this universe. Phase 2 and 3 are literally just her trying harder, with her gaining this rushdown attack that turns the entire floor into spikes, as well as having 2 sickles to throw you off. Phase 3 is literally just one fluid, never-ending combo. There is never a single moment in this phase where she is in her idle animation. But once you master her moveset and learn to match her speed and aggression, the feeling is like no other. I'll admit that I have used the term dance to describe boss fights way too often, but Carmelita truly deserves to be described as a dance. It's one of the most difficult fights for sure. It took me 29 attempts to finally beat her, but damn was it all worth it for such a phenomenal experience. The only thing I could possibly nick this boss for is the enemy gauntlet beforehand, as you have to cut through a few phases of ant warriors before getting to duke it out with the real fight. But I think they have the right amount of minions to not feel unfair or overwhelming. Also, the brute bodyguards are entirely unique enemies and really satisfying to kill, especially when you learn they can only attack like a rook in chess. It is a little tedious, but definitely not enough to dethrone her as my top spot. She may not have the thematic density or emotional baggage found with the previous 2 bosses either, but when the fight is this invigorating and satisfying to master, it really doesn't even become close. At the end of the day, you go to a boss fight for a fun battle, and Carmelita is some of the most fun I've ever had in a game like this. Scar Singer Carmelita is easily my pick for the greatest boss in Silksong. What an extraordinary foe to end the ranking of such an extraordinary game. With that, the Silksong boss ranking has finally been finished, and damn did this take longer than I expected. It was a lot of fun though, not just to make another ranking or because I loved Silksong as much as I did, but doing a video on a game that wasn't Monster Hunter was a nice change of pace. I just enjoy making content and rankings like this, and it sparked a lot of ideas for different videos I want to do in the future. I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below, and in particular, if you guys would be interested in seeing me rank the bosses in the original Hollow Knights. Not for a while, of course. I got a lot of projects planned and that is a ton of bosses to cover, but it would be something I'd love to do. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment on what your favorite or least favorite Silksong bosses were, and subscribe to see what future content I have to offer. Whether you were introduced to my channel through this video, or have been around since my first ranking back in February, thank you so much for your support. This is Brybashton Benedicts, and lead thy life as thou seest fit.